Why is it that Direct Action Everywhere thinks that making a display of weakness is strength? To be slightly snippy about it, why do they think that breaking down in tears in a shopping mall or in a restaurant, that ranting uncontrollably, showing that you're overwhelmed, that you're weak, why do they think that's going to bring about social change? Now, I'm not saying this in a mean-spirited way, but DXE has contrived this as a political method of what they call disruption. It's very different. If you're talking about, like here on YouTube, I see completely sincere videos of people sitting down, talking about their feelings, talking about how they're overwhelmed with their relationship with their boyfriend or their boss or their problems. I'm completely fine with that. And as I say, most of that is completely sincere. It's not contrived, and it's not being presented as a political methodology to change the world. If I come on this channel and talk to you about my divorce, it's not in any way comparable to what Direct Action Everywhere is doing, even if I break down crying on camera. I don't think that's happened yet on this channel. I don't think I've wept on camera for yet. But I say I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to the open display of emotion. What's strange to me, many aspects of this are strange to me. Direct Action Everywhere make these over-the-top claims about saving the world and about having a methodology that is based on the study of social science research and learning the lessons of political history. And they then vaguely allude to Gandhi in India, the abolition of slavery in the United States. They'll allude to anti-Vietnam War protests. They'll kind of allude to a bunch of things really quickly with a very shallow gloss. They like to mention the Arab Spring. I don't know if that's gone out of style yet. Take a look at the Arab Spring, man. It's been a disaster. Humanitarian nightmare resulting in civil war and what have you. I don't know if they're still showing the Arab Spring as a successful example of social change they want to imitate. Anyway, I roll my eyes at that a great deal. And I wonder if they've read anything about any of these examples. But anyway, they throw these out really quickly, and then they show you their methodology. And they have videos on the internet where they display exactly their ideal of how a disruption is supposed to go. There's a sort of glaring absence of logical lines connecting any of these points of reference. You're left to connect the dots. Like, oh yeah, Gandhi. Therefore, breaking down weeping in a restaurant is a great idea, is a great method of social change. Oh yeah, the abolition of slavery and the Arab Spring. Therefore, showing up in a restaurant, ranting uncontrollably, holding up a sign and breaking down weeping, showing people how emotionally fragile, that's going to bring about social change. Well, pardon me, but at what stage did the United States abolitionist movement use these methods? At what stage did Gandhi wrote at enormous length about his method of pursuing and achieving social change. At what stage did he endorse this method or anything like it? The answer is never. And this troubles me on many different levels. If you watch this channel regularly, you know I've researched the history of Asia from many different angles. I would have liked to have been a specialist in just one country or just one region in Asia, but I haven't had that luxury. So I have actually studied the political history of India also to some extent. Right now I'm doing Japan. In the past I've also worked on Cambodia and many other places. For a relatively fun and indeed shocking article, there's a famous article that was published in Commentary Magazine. Commentary Magazine is a magazine I only know about because of Woody Allen. Woody Allen used to make jokes about it. He used to, kind of insult this magazine as somewhat pretentious source of information. But if you Google it, you'll get it really quickly because this is still a famous article. It's titled "The Gandhi Nobody Knows." So if you just do a Google for Commentary Magazine Gandhi expose, you'll get this article right away. That article will contain many facts about Mohandas Gandhi that will probably shock you, even if you're cynical about politics. It'll reveal to you the extent to which what people tend to say about Gandhi, and I can't even say left-wing people, people who are peace activists, all kinds of people. The legend of Gandhi is remarkably different from the historical reality of Gandhi. But, for me, that article, even though it reveals many scandalous and shocking things, it doesn't, I think, deal with the core issue here, which is that, Gandhi's political praxis, which I see cynically referred to by people like Direct Action Everywhere, it's actually set out in a multi-volume work called Nonviolence in Peace and War. And if you compare the first volume to the second volume, there's a tremendous change because Gandhi himself actually lost faith in his own political methodology. His ideas changed between the first volume and the second volume. Now, I read that many, many years ago. But the core idea that Gandhi advanced, and that people in India really got sincerely excited about at the time, was that his method of nonviolence was a method of warfare. It was war, but then once you were in the position of superior power, you would hold back from actually slaughtering your enemies, from actually engaging in violence. So it's not at all what people imagine it to be. Now, that method, you can say it's a good method or a bad method for India at that time. But it was a method devised for a situation where Gandhi felt confident that the vast majority of people in the population of India were opposed to the British Empire. So they were an absolute majority. They were, from his perspective, they were 90% of the population or 98% of the population. Whether or not that's true, I mean, maybe they were only 85%. I don't know. You can look into exactly what percentage of the population were really supporting independence of the British Empire. But doubtless, it was a huge majority of Muslims, of Hindus, of all kinds of people in India at that time. So he felt in that circumstance, they were in the position to demand change, to organize and amass themselves, and then to press for change like an army, imitating military methods, which a lot of people in India at the time were very positive about. There was a very pro-war feeling in the air in India because the way India experienced World War I was completely different from the way Europe did. For one thing, of course, none of the battlefields were in India. But the Indian perspective on war at that time was not what you might expect. And Gandhi himself, was very pro-war as a younger man. When Gandhi was living in South Africa, he was actively trying to join the British Army to fight for the British Empire, not against it. Very interesting psychologically and politically. Look, and all this stuff is from memory. I mean, none of this is scripted. I'm sorry. These people at DXE who want to be your great intellectual leaders, they're painfully ignorant of exactly the stuff they choose to speechify about. This isn't my chosen area of expertise or interest, but I'm better informed than Wayne Seong, guys. I'm sorry. His writing on all these subjects is banal at best. Amazingly bad author. But anyway, hey, he's got fans. It's cool. I don't like Kanye West either, but millions of people like Kanye West, so whatever. It is what it is. Sorry, so I was talking about Gandhi's overall approach to nonviolence in peace and war. This type of methodology, even looking over all the bizarre contradictions within it, even choosing to ignore Gandhi's own loss of faith in the method, because Gandhi, in volume 2 of that work, is already saying that he was wrong, and he regrets endorsing this method, because in his words, he thought India was taking the road of the nonviolence of the strong, but in fact, they were trapped on the road of the nonviolence of the weak. And in discussing this, he attacks exactly the type of methods that Direct Action Everywhere uses. Gandhi explains that he's completely opposed to putting yourself in the position of a beggar, of asking for social change from someone more powerful than yourself, that his model of nonviolence was only of putting yourself in the position of the stronger, of having the ability to threaten violence and then holding back from actually doing it. So look, to give DXE some credit, and to shift to another but reasonably profound aspect of this puzzle, Direct Action Everywhere are also into challenging the normalcy of meat eating. That was something I was thinking about just today. But again, so this method, if that's your point, if you want to scream and weep in public and show extreme emotional reactions because you're outraged that meat eating is normal, and given all the intellectual pretensions of DXE, their claims to using social science research, learning from lessons of history, etc., what is the basis for thinking that this type of so-called interruption in people's normal lives will actually challenge the social normalcy of meat eating, leather wearing, etc.? It's very clear to me that the effect of having someone display extreme emotion in this way, like Priya herself, like the founders themselves, going into a restaurant, screaming incoherently, weeping, holding up a sign, etc., it does not challenge the normalcy of meat eating. It reaffirms the normalcy of meat eating and shows you as vegans to be abnormal, to be crazy. Most people will see that and think, oh, these people are psychologically abnormal. These people have some kind of emotional or psychological problem that makes them react this way to something that everyone else regards as normal and acceptable. And they may not be wrong. We have to face up to this also, guys. I mean, God, I remember that video with a bite-sized vegan weeping about the death of her dog and having an emotional breakdown. It's real. But I mean, I've talked to the vegans about it. It's like, shit, at what point in this movement can we look at the relationship vegans have with their household pets and say, hey, this is kind of messed up, like psychologically, like in terms of vegan philosophy and practice, like this is not really something we should be celebrating. Like dogs evolved in the wild. They didn't evolve to be a decoration for your carpet. Like, you know, our standard of what is normal in human-animal relationships has to be based on wild animals, not on domesticated animals that, you know, even if it's a rescue dog, even if whatever the excuse or history is, like these emotional relationships, this is not the core of veganism as a movement, and it doesn't even fit into the social model of veganism very well. Sorry, one controversy leads to another here. The people who regard vegans as crazy or as having an abnormal emotional attachment to animals, they're not 100% wrong. Some of us fall into that category. Some vegans are crazy cat ladies and crazy dogs. And, you know, bless them. Their heart's in the right place. I'm not here to hate on you guys. But yeah, the appearance that people are crazy in this way. But if we're supposedly learning from history, is this how cigarettes went from being normal to abnormal? If your point is to challenge the normalcy of meat eating, there was a time not too long ago when people smoked cigarettes in the church, in the hospital, in the military. They used to smoke cigarettes sitting around the boardroom table, looking at maps. All those places are non-smoking now. It used to be normal for pregnant mothers to be smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, and everything else. These things were challenged. How and why? Science is a part of it. Social stigma is a part of it. Public education is part of it. You can draw up a whole diagram. But yeah, there's been a dramatic change. I would say there's also been a dramatic change in attitudes towards alcohol consumption. And I think that change is still ongoing. I think we're going to continue to change our attitudes. But there's almost no place in any of those examples, whether it's India gaining its independence, the abolition of slavery, changing attitudes towards alcohol and cigarettes. There is almost no place in this for these overwrought emotional breakdowns, which are the core methodology that Direct Action Everywhere supports, promotes, and defines their movement by. So to me, this is an open contradiction. And I'll just, to give one more caveat, it's true. Like with cigarette smoking, it's possible that there was a documentary film that interviewed someone who was dying of lung cancer. It's possible that there's some role for this type of emotional gnashing of teeth, emotional outpouring. It's true. I'm not going to say there's zero role for that. In India's revolt against the British Empire, there's some role for tear-jerking accounts of people whose husbands and sons have been killed by the bayonets of British. Sure, there's some role for salacious, emotional anecdotes. Some. But if DXE has these claims to learning from the lessons of history and social science research, how is it possible that they've taken in this constellation of stars, all these unrelated points with no dotted line connecting them, and the only lesson they've taken from it and the methodology they've pulled out of it is walk into a restaurant, break down weeping, etc. It's pathetic. And it has that worst possible combination of being pathetic, embarrassing, discrediting the movement, making us all look crazy, not getting results, and at the same time being tremendously self-important, intellectually pretentious, and asking for your donations now. Hey, man, there are two aspects to this. You can curse the darkness, or, you can try to light up a candle. Ultimately, I'm saying this stuff about DXE because I want to do better than them myself. And I want to see other vegans get organized, do something better, do something real. There's a well-researched, in-depth, hard-hitting article about everyone's least favorite vegan activist organization, Direct Action Everywhere, DXE, in Berkeley-Side magazine this week. And I think this article raises some really important, really meaningful questions about the past, present, and future of veganism as a movement, about ethical and political questions in veganism. But I think the journalist took a step in the wrong direction in trying to construe Wayne Seong as a charismatic cult leader. For one thing, he's not charismatic. Really, he's not charismatic. That's one part of the problem. But the other thing is, when you engage with these issues in that way, you just create this defensive reaction of, well, how do you define a cult? Who are you calling a cult leader? In what ways is this political movement like a cult? In which ways is that? It's kind of counterproductive. Ultimately, Direct Action Everywhere will never resemble a cult, even as much as Catholicism, Judaism, or mainstream forms of Islam. Is it just me, or does this look like a cult to you? No, maybe it's just me. I admit, though, there is a passing resemblance to cult activity. You know what? Maybe it's the music that's the problem. If we just switch up the soundtrack, if we put the same clip to different music, it won't look like a cult at all.
Like a can of mace. Chase bent over. Bite me and taste me. Yo, I love y'all.
This demonstration, like almost all the demonstrations he lists, were done by other people who were not part of leadership in most cases, and in most cases, I had no knowledge of, much less support of these campaigns. So my focus, in contrast to what the article in Berkeley-Side states, has not been on doing protests and disruptions and yelling at people. All those things are things that I think are honestly pretty counterproductive. My focus has been on investigative work, giving ordinary people the right to know where their meat products are coming from. That will continue to be the case if I'm mayor.
Is this an all-time low for Wayne Seong? The day when he came on camera and claimed that he does not now and never has supported disruption as a mode of activism. When he claimed that those tactics and those demonstrations that DXE does, that he regards them as counterproductive. That's not what he's about politically at all. Wow. There are no depths to which this man won't sink. And I don't think it's even that he's running for mayor. Wayne, I think you're a liar. I think you're a person of absolutely zero moral integrity who will tell any lie in any given moment to suit any given context. Here's a 55-minute long video called Why Disrupt by Wayne Seong, in which he explains his philosophical and political reasons for exactly why he supports exactly these types of demonstrations. And yes, they certainly do include screaming at people. They certainly do include interrupting people's meals in restaurants. And oh yeah, did you miss the memo? They also include going to prison. Here's a video of him recruiting a young, good-looking female to go spend years of her life in prison. And in case you didn't know, Wayne is right now facing charges that could result in him spending years in prison.
Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the work that we do is not going out all the way in.
Like chaining yourselves to things and
Absolutely. Yeah. Protests and disruptions and yelling at people, all those things are things that I think are honestly pretty counterproductive. Yeah, I mean, the vast majority of the work that we do is not going out all the way in.
Like chaining yourselves to things and
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
We've done civil disobedience before outside of slaughterhouses and factory farms, and we're going to do more of it.
And you can get arrested for that, right? I mean, I'm down for it.
I feel sorry for these people because a lot of them are reasonably highly educated, reasonably intelligent, physically fit people. Like, they're not disabled, they're not physically or mentally disabled. They could do anything with their lives. They could pursue political change and cultural change in so many ways. They could make the world a better place in so many different ways, and they're trapped in a false ideology premised on this assumption that the way to change the world is to stand next to the highway holding a piece of paper with a slogan written on it, chanting and hollering as traffic goes by, as people drive their cars to pick up their laundry, pick up their dry cleaning, go food shopping. Like, huh? You know, for half a second, they see you holding this sign saying meat is murder. To run out on a baseball field and interrupt the game for half a second. So a bunch of people who don't care are like, huh? For half a second, they get exposed to the concept that meat is murder or free range is a myth or whatever it is they've written on the sign for that day. This stupid, toxic, counterproductive notion of what politics itself is.
Do more of it.
And you can get arrested for that, right? I mean, I'm down for it.
You can get arrested, and we suggest you get training in civil disobedience and nonviolent resistance before you do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take me to jail. I don't care. Seriously, that's
I can tell.
I'm serious. Take me.
You've got the passion.
Should we be surprised that Wayne Seong is now trying to distance himself from his former political positions now that he is standing for election as the mayor of Berkeley? And I just want to mention very briefly, he does have a chance at winning this election. He really does, because his competition is rather pathetic. And the year 2020, any election you can name is going to be a roll of the dice, because who knows, for a local election, who knows just how few voters might turn up. So yeah, Wayne does have a chance of winning. He does. He could really do well. I will not take that away from him. And I've watched the debate that Wayne participated in between him. And no, I am not going to say that Wayne is stupider than the other candidates. He might be more intelligent. He might be more positively motivated. He might be a better mayor than the two other candidates he's running at. Wayne, I am not going to insult and denigrate you like that. But Wayne, I am going to say you're a goddamn liar for claiming that you didn't support disruption, that you don't support disruption, that you didn't pull in huge numbers of young people to ruining their lives, or at least ruining a few months of their lives by doing this inane horseshit, over-the-top emotional histrionics in the middle of Chipotle restaurant that are then immortalized forever on YouTube as vegan cringe compilation. Wayne, just wake up! I mean, what the hell? Who supported disruption as a mode of activism more than Wayne Seong?
She goes into a chicken restaurant and she wants everybody to hear that what they're eating are murdered people.
Please think of her name every time you see somebody's body on a plate. Her name is Snow, and she just wants to live.
Now you want to say in your run for mayor that you've never supported this, that you don't support, that what you support is just investigative journalism, showing people what's going on inside the slaughterhouse. How dare you, Wayne?
Protests and disruptions and yelling at people, all those things are things that I think are honestly pretty counterproductive.
It's the easiest lie to expose. Anyway, look, it would make a huge difference if Wayne instead said that in the past he did support those methods, but now he realizes that people like me were right all along when we criticized them. I know that he's aware of the critique offered by this channel, but sure, Wayne, you could come out and say that in the past, this is what you preached, this is what you encouraged other people to do, but now you see the error of ways. That would be a very different thing than what we heard from you in that clip. But hey, guys, as you saw up front, there's the $4 million question. Quote, in 2017, donors contributed $47,000 to DXE, but donations increased tenfold in 2018 to $470,000, according to tax filings. In 2019, DXE raised $421,837 in contributions and grants and earned another $81,670 from program revenues. However, whenever you're looking at DXE, they always have multiple incorporated entities. DXE Global is not the same as DXE of America. There's a bit of a shell game going on. You've got to be very careful about which organization you're talking about. So there is this other organization called Friends of DXE. Friends of DXE has raised even more money. Since 2015, donors have contributed more than $4.2 million to the nonprofit. In 2014, donors gave Friends of DXE only $48,432. It went up to $1.7 million in 2018, $1.2 million in 2019. While the organization does not name its donors, one person contributed more than $500,000 and another gave $140,000. So yes, the point is there may be a small number of very wealthy donors who are responsible for the bulk of this multi-million-dollar sum. Now, very briefly, the journalist asks, quote, "Where does all that money go? DXE has no paid staff. Instead, Friends of DXE funds a number of $35,000 annual fellowships to DXE's most ardent activists, spending $783,373. That's $750,000 in recent years, according to its 990 forms. $1 million just really doesn't go very far these days. And guys, I want to say again, the bullshit stops on social media. This article claims that they have about 200 supporters. 200 supporters in Berkeley, California. That's not a very impressive number. If you just look at the number of views Wayne Seong gets on YouTube for these lectures, it really does not seem credible that he even has 200 supporters. Okay, guys, $4 million can buy you a whole lot of friends, can buy you a whole lot of influence, a whole lot of clout. But in the case of Direct Action Everywhere, what they're doing is so despicable that $4 million has not even bought them 1,000 friends or even 100 people who are interested to listen to Wayne's lectures as he now is running for mayor of Berkeley. If you have 200 supporters, you should probably have at least 600 people watching those YouTube videos, because each one of those supporters has friends and family they share the link with, and they're excited and they're part of your campaign for mayor. Come on, bro. If you're pulling under 50 views per video on YouTube, it's a sign. It's a sign of just how weak and shallow the support for DXE is, despite a cumulative budget of over $4 million in those years. And again, we've already heard there's a bit of a show game here. That's only the budget from one of their several incorporated entities. But look, $4 million can buy you a whole lot of friends. In the case of Direct Action Everywhere, it is worth asking, why do they have so few friends? Why do they have so little support? In any case, I continue here quoting the article. The recipients, many of whom have lived at one time in the group home on the Plaza Drive, are also DXE's leaders, including Johnson, Priya, Almira, Cassie, etc., etc. Some of these names might be familiar to you guys from YouTube or from Instagram or what have you. But note here the very last sentence. Over the years, 10 to 20 DXE members have gotten fellowships. So you're talking about more than $4 million being collected and spent. And you're telling me only 10 to 20 people benefited from this, and the total number of people involved in Berkeley is maybe generously estimated to be 200? Nobody else sees what's wrong with this? Look, guys, we all got to define success in different ways. We all got to define failure in different ways. I know academics with PhDs who write articles, and for them, it's a big success if that article reaches like 20 readers. They're writing things that reach an incredibly small audience. You can have a conference on some kind of academic topic, and if 30 people participate in the conference, and you manage to circulate 100 copies of the proceedings of the conference to 100 different libraries around the world, you say, wow, that was a great success. The standards for success and the definition of failure will differ from one context to the next. But in the case of the rise and fall of Wayne Seong, it is now quite possible that he's going to spend many years in prison. And I have to question just how much or how little success there was when, in 2020, right now, Wayne was at his peak.
I mean, I've had friends who've been to prison, and I know that it's not like federal prison, and I feel like I'm someone who can adjust to my surroundings. I also know that it would be difficult, I'm sure.
So the main idea I'm going to try to convey to you in this video is that to waste someone's time is actually immoral.
So I had done a topless, been a part of the topless protest that had happened a couple weeks before that at Costco, and so I had already sort of gotten a taste for like on the smaller scale of like what that was like. Of course, then we were covered much more heavily with like fake blood, and we even put like the special effects makeup on the nipples to make it. And I in some way felt like I was still covered up. I definitely have some very deeply rooted insecurities and like body image, just issues with body image and just feeling like, oh, I should be thinner. There's a lot of things on my entire body that I'm not happy with, but on my upper body, it's like, oh, I don't like the way my arms look. Like, there were years whenever I was younger where like I wanted to, get like a boob job because I felt like I had small boobs and like, and just a lot of different things going on for me that I definitely felt like, just the idea of like not having my shirt on and just like all that exposure to these parts of my body that I'm not super like happy about. I'm pretty much willing to do anything with that frame of mind if I feel that it's going to be effective and get that message out there.
Money, fame, power, respect, sex. These are the powerful motives shaping human behavior in politics, in our private lives, in the economic sphere, but yes, y'all, especially here on social media, especially on the internet. Let me go through that list one more time for you. Money, fame, power, respect, sex. Not necessarily in that order. For some people, sex is the top priority. For some people, it's money or the fame. You can shuffle that deck of cards and each time have a different one come up on top. This is not about saving the planet. This is not about lobbying government for political reform. This is not about promoting the health benefits of a vegan diet. This is not about educating people, doing educational outreach so that they understand the unbelievable suffering that the dairy industry creates, that the fur industry creates, the unbelievable suffering that's required just to put meat on their plate. Nope. This is about money, fame, power, respect, sex. And you know what this headline fails to convey to you? This whole article fails to convey to you. There were actually 4 protesters that ran the stage. 4. But 3 of them didn't get naked. Who's this woman? Who's this Muslim fundamentalist woman? She looks like she's at least 100 pounds overweight. I guess she's a Muslim fundamentalist vegan protester? Why isn't she getting naked? Why is it only this girl? I mean, look, we got to talk about the politics of beauty and body image rolled into this too. Priya is the first one to run the stage fully clothed. Well, if you actually believe that getting naked would save the animals, this Muslim woman, she doesn't care enough to show us her 100-pound overweight, middle-aged, or elderly body? I can't really guess her age. Is it only young, conventionally attractive people who are going to get naked to save the planet? Is there some reason why? Is it actually about being sexually attractive? Is that the point of this? Is it supposed to be an erotic display? And what about this girl? This girl just participated in the protest but decided, nope, I'm not showing my body. If you look, I agree, this is not an effective form of protest. If you go back to World War I, there was a golden era of nude protests where the nudity was not erotic at all. It was primarily to prevent the police from brutalizing the protesters, and it was a show of Christian humility and kind of abject subjugation where people would march naked in the streets to oppose the war. And it wasn't sexy. Of course, it was a lot of elderly people. It was a lot of flabby, out-of-shape elderly people. It was humiliating. They were themselves being humiliated through this nude march. And they were humiliating the authorities and humiliating others, because it was like, well, if you think you're going to round us up and put us in paddy wagons, you're going to arrest us, you're going to have to lay hands on us naked. So the world has changed a great deal in 100 years, and that would have been more than 100 years ago now. There was nude protests against World War I. This woman, she's referred to as topless in the headlines and the news coverage, and I completely believe she only did this stunt so that she would appear in headlines, in newspapers, get news coverage. But she's not just topless. I can't say that she's wearing pants. She's not wearing trousers. She doesn't have any pockets there for her house keys or her wallet. I mean, she is as close to naked as can possibly be. She's wearing some kind of skin-tight yoga pants. I can't call those pants at all. That's some kind of long underwear she's got on there to add to the revealing or erotic effect, I guess, of her being as nude as possible. And again, it's not the middle-aged people, it's not the educated people, it's not the natural leaders of the vegan movement who are taking on this role, of course. No. I mean, what's the next step for this, guys? What is the future of veganism? This group, Direct Action Everywhere, they initialized their name as DXE, Direct Action Everywhere. They came onto the scene promising that they had something profoundly, fundamentally better to offer than any other animal rights movement in the past. And all they are doing is reinventing the stupidity of PETA from 20 years ago, step by step. They're catching up with the same lame methods, the same non-functional techniques that PETA used, and they're going to get the same non-results. But the one thing they will get is the one thing they really want: money, fame, power, respect, sex. All these people are on an ego trip, and I'm sure if you could travel back in time to 1992, there were a whole lot of people in that organization, PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, who are on the same ego trip. Reinventing the wheel, but it's a broken wheel, and it's going to roll down the same hill with the same results. In the year 2019, it is fair to say that vegan activism has settled into a few familiar grooves, a few repetitious patterns that we see again and again. There was a time, maybe just 5 years ago, when a lot of these ideas were fresh and new. There was a time when the Earthlings experience, they were the first people to put together this idea of sitting silently, wearing a mask, holding an open laptop computer, showing slaughterhouse footage. That was a new and exciting idea. I think people, including myself, first found out about on Tumblr. That was before veganism was so big on YouTube. Tumblr was where it was at for people sharing that idea. The Earthlings experience spread. Other groups knocked off and modified the idea, etc. There was a time when each of these techniques, in terms of street theater, open protest, and even digital slacktivism, such as we're engaging now, there was a time when these things were exciting or new, and that time is now in the past. So increasingly, I have people sending me sympathetic email reflecting, whether they're just looking at what they've done in the last few months or in the last decade, that when they get involved in vegan activism, they feel that their time is being wasted. So the main idea I'm going to try to convey to you in this video is that to waste someone's time is actually immoral. This may not occur to us because in our intimate lives, relations between husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, even grandparents and grandchildren, there's a sense in which we're expected to behave as if wasting time is no waste at all. That, to drive for 3 hours just so you can see your grandparents and sit around kind of doing nothing in particular for several hours and drive back. This is part of the politesse of the bourgeois class, that everyone ought to have time to waste and one ought to behave as if it is nothing. It is merely gracious to waste one's time with someone else. Well, this doesn't extend to things like politics, education, work. Really, it's a fiction. It's a fiction in our times, maybe very roughly analogous to the way in which people used to engage in animal sacrifice to welcome a guest into their homes, taking something tremendously precious and destroying it as if to prove that it's nothing. as a symbolic way of receiving a guest. Well, the sacrifices we make for one another in the 21st century are largely sacrifices of time, and to a much lesser extent, sacrifices of money. Several different people wrote into me about their experience with recent protests just in the last couple of days since my most recent critiques on this issue. One of them was describing to me what it was like to drive 5 hours each way to attend a protest that he felt accomplished nothing and didn't even say anything interesting to the people attending the contest. So you're talking about driving 5 hours, stay in a hotel. This is time as well as money being spent. Attend this event, drive back. I assume he's only got one night in a hotel and not two. This is a big sacrifice. If you're talking about people who are raising kids and have a full-time job, it's a big, big sacrifice. And what do you get in return for that sacrifice? For the most part, what's going on within these familiar grooves and patterns in veganism, it's accomplishing nothing but providing one spectacle after another, one occasion after another for vegans to pat themselves in the back, for vegans to affirm their own sense of identity. Now, I'm not going to say that has zero value. Somebody asked me this question on the internet a few days ago. Someone asked me, do I really feel this kind of activism has zero value? And I said, no, I would not say zero. The value is greater than zero, but most of the value is just in giving vegans a chance to meet one another. There are lots of people who met their boyfriend and later got married at a vegan animal rights protest or an anti-fur protest or whatever. There's a sense in which meeting other people could be the basis for more meaningful forms of activism in the future, but in most of these cases, that is the only positive thing I can say about it. The events themselves are meaningless, they're a waste of time, and the actual lectures, I mean, there's a reason why most of them don't get uploaded to YouTube. The actual content of the lectures is people standing there prompting the audience to cheer, like prompting the audience to applaud the speaker in response to the speaker telling the audience how wonderful they are. I mean, I made fun of James Aspey for this, only so many months ago. James Aspey stands there and gives a speech to vegans, and it's like, you have to realize, you people are the future. You people are saving the planet. You people are saving the animals. You're the best people in the world. The crowd goes, well, they're applauding him, applauding themselves. It's a cycle of self-praise that's going on here. Anyway, I find it deeply embarrassing, but again, above all else, it's a waste of time. What does it mean to say that there's a question of morality in wasting someone's time? Several years ago, I had a chance, I think a very remote chance, to enter a master's degree and PhD program at a university in Montreal, Canada. Now, why did I gesture like this? Because I was living in Saskatchewan, Canada. And my wife of the time, my wife and I together devoted a considerable amount of time and money to fly in an airplane from Saskatchewan to Montreal just to have what was, I think, supposed to be a 1-hour meeting with this professor. And he only talked to us for about 15 minutes. I could get into the details of that, but it was truly hurtful in that circumstance. This guy was a professor of Buddhism, and I had prepared for the meeting. I'd read his PhD thesis. I got his PhD thesis out of the light. He had not published a whole lot of research on Buddhism since then, so I went and got a copy of his PhD thesis, and I read it. And I was prepared to really talk about my own research in Buddhist philosophy and his research in Buddhist philosophy. And I show up as someone who has years and years of background in the discipline, and I get fobbed off with a kind of aimless 15-minute pep talk, and I'm told, look, you can study here if you want to. I didn't feel so upset about it at that moment. It took a little while for it to sink in. But I was really being robbed of one of the very few opportunities to get higher education I would ever have before or since. And, this was a person who had no respect for the fact, had no respect for our time, for the extent to which he was wasting our time. Also, again, hotels in Montreal are not cheap. Flights within Canada are not cheap. You're better off flying to Thailand or flying to Las Vegas than flying between any two cities in Canada. It's miserable. It's a huge waste of money. And you think, this person has no respect for my time, and in a sense, they have no respect for me as a human being. So this is a minor and yet crushing disappointment that had really serious long-term effects on my life. And, I've got to say, as detached as I may be about this experience, as low as my expectations may have been going into this meeting with this professor, it left me with a deep and lasting sense of resentment. It's possible I'll meet that guy at some point. That has happened sometimes, where I meet professors of Buddhism years later after my negative interactions with the Baimo. So, hey, do you want to know what impact that had on my life for the next 10, 20 years? Like, for you, this may have been a casual and flippant decision, but like, you know what? You make, especially with graduate students, undergraduate students too, you're casually making decisions that have huge impacts on your students' life. So, the question of respect, in that case, we had an appointment. I wrote to him in advance and made the appointment, and then we booked the trip. So to disrespect somebody to that extent, to waste their time, there are real questions of morality involved, morality and immorality. And, especially with left-wing politics, the extent to which everybody left of center, not even everybody on the left, they get used to such hyperbolic, over-the-top, exaggerated ideological language, extreme language of praise, and also extreme language of criticism, the fulmination against the status quo, extreme language claiming that the government is totally immoral, that the economic system is totally immoral, that everything has to be resolved in some kind of crescendo, some kind of terrible uprising, revolution, and so on. This is antithetical to a more down-to-earth, pragmatic planning process where you make it clear what it is you're offering people, what it is they should expect, what use it is you're going to make of their time, and where people feel respected, people feel that what they were offered, what they were promised is what they were really given. So whether that's that you have a conference where you tell people, look, if you come to this conference, I'm going to give you, 1 hour on stage, and you get maybe 20 minutes where you get on stage, you get to speak. I'm going to introduce you to these and these people. You're going to get to eat at a dinner, and you're going to get introduced. Like, what is it that you're offering as a vegan movement at a vegan event? Is there a certain workshop? Is there something really of practical value? Is there some educational value? Is there some training you're going to get out of attending this thing? Because people are making serious sacrifices in terms of their time and money. I know one female vegan activist, and she has 2 kids and a job, not a full-time job, part-time job, and she's raising 2 kids. And, time is precious to her, and she was kicked out of a vegan group. They exiled her because she did not meet their quota for attending a certain number of hours of street protests per month. So they wanted a commitment for, if you wanted to be inside the organization, you had to be spending whatever it was, 8 hours a month minimum or something. You had to spend a certain number of hours standing on the street at these protests. All right. So I have an email here. This was a public comment on Facebook from a woman named Jean. I'm just going to use her first name, but I assume this is someone whose first language is English. You'll see why I mentioned that here. Jean writes in, "Hi Eisel, I hope you could give me some advice on how to move forward. I've been an activist for a few years with a few local vegan organizations and Anonymous for the Voiceless." So Anonymous for the Voiceless are one of the groups who stand around in a mask silently. Unfortunately, none of that ever worked to an extent that was justifying the amount of time I put in it. So, upon moving to another state in Europe, I eventually quit. So those are the crucial words here. None of that ever worked to an extent that was justifying the amount of time I put into it. Preach. So she goes on to say more about her situation. She's 22 years old. Good illustrator or painter, speaks several languages, lives below the poverty line, is trying to study philosophy in her spare time. Okay, so you got no money, you've barely got a home. There's no mention here of a job. Well, let me tell you something. You in the audience may feel right now that watching this YouTube video was a waste of your time. If so, I apologize. But the level of effort, both for the creator and for the audience, that goes into watching this YouTube video, it's exponentially more efficient than showing up at a street protest or even showing up at a conference, like an academic conference, or going to see a lecture in veganism and hoping to hear something interesting or be able to speak to someone, hoping to make that connection. So, Jean, for your situation, given what you've told me, I know just one form of vegan activism that won't waste your time, that'll bring some positive people into your life, where you can use your artistic talent if you're good at illustrating, if you're good at making images. I only know one option I can recommend to you that you can do in poverty from your tiny apartment where you're living below the poverty line. Doesn't require that you own a car, doesn't require that you drive 5 hours in each direction. I only know one option, and it's right here on YouTube. So look, guys, there was a book years ago called Weapons of the Weak. Terrible book written by a communist asshole. I don't want to talk about it. It was a hit book, Weapons of the Weak, and we have this phrase still in the English language, complete garbage in terms of political science and anthropology. But let me tell you something. In the 21st century, right now, standing on the street chanting slogans, these are not the weapons of the weak. Handing out pamphlets, no. Options like YouTube, these really are effective weapons of the weak. And hey, I have a lot to complain about YouTube. I'm really actively considering quitting forever right now because my life has come to such a bad closure, to be quite frank. It's been one tragedy after another for me, personally, professionally, educationally, otherwise. I'll make more videos talking about that. But the good news is, if you take the time to make something beautiful, something interesting, something thought-provoking here on YouTube, it lasts forever. It stays up, whether you think of it as a work of art or as something closer to having a conversation with someone in a cafe. If you want to have conversations with a whole bunch of strangers, try to spread the message of veganism, keep in mind, I've had more than 3.5 million conversations now. More than 3.5 million total views or total viewings on this channel. There's no way I could have accomplished that standing on a street corner, holding a placard, chanting slowly. There's no way I could have accomplished that wearing a mask or participating in these other forms of protest. And for you, maybe, just maybe, you'll be luckier than I was, because I come out of this veganism thing burnt and broken. But maybe you'll be one of the lucky ones. So my advice to you is, be virtuous, but be lucky. I've been asked to give my opinion on an ambitious new vegan movement called Direct Action Everywhere. And I don't want to sound like a jerk, and I don't want to sound overly negative or overly harsh or critical. However, I live in a city where Direct Action Everywhere doesn't exist. They don't have a chapter here. And what I know about them is simply based on the way they define themselves on their own website and some lectures and public statements made by one of their founders and leaders, a guy named Wayne Seong. Now, it is to Wayne's credit that he sets the bar high for himself. He openly states his intellectual aspirations as well as his political ambitions. He states his own sort of pedigree in terms of the books that have influenced him, the professors that have influenced him, and so on. And as such, he invites a fairly high level of scrutiny for his ideas and for the plan that he sets down and sets out as being directly informed by the conclusions of social science research. So with that being said, it may come as a surprise to Wayne that some people, such as myself, who could be his strongest supporters, actually have a lot of apprehension and skepticism when looking at the material he's creating that he may imagine would appeal very strongly to someone like myself. My first diploma is in political science. I have a serious political interest in veganism and social movements and social change of various kinds. Anyone who sincerely cares about the very recent history of what's called the Arab Spring, basically talking about from 2010 to 2015, most of the big events people remember in 2011, anyone who sincerely cares about that history would be somewhat nauseated by the cynical use that Wayne makes of the history of the Arab Spring in presenting his case for his preferred method for vegan activism. The history of the Arab Spring at this point has a tremendously high body count. And anyone who hears what Wayne has to say about it, I mean, whether or not you care much about politics, would have to wonder, look, Wayne, have you read even one book about the politics of Egypt or of any other country that's been involved in the Arab Spring? The Arab Spring covers a lot of territory and a lot of complex political histories. But it's grim, and of course, in the last few years, most of the optimism has disappeared from evaluations of what happened, why it happened, and what the outcomes were. Now, that doesn't mean I'm offended in a childlike way by the idea of a vegan talking about the Arab Spring. If you have a sincere interest in it, and your opinion is informed by the facts, with or without any sensitivity to those facts, by all means, say whatever you've got to say. But when I'm hearing and responding to the manifesto-like declarations that Wayne Seong is making on the basis of his very strange interpretation of the Arab Spring, I'm certainly disappointed. I don't think Wayne lives up to his own hype. Now, the other examples that he chooses to cherry pick from the political history of the world and kind of dumb down and misrepresent and use to further his aims are slavery, the civil rights struggle of the 1960s, and gay rights, gay marriage, equal rights for gay people, and so on. And none of those are used in an intelligent or nuanced or well-informed way. I don't really feel like harping on at length about that, and most people would probably respond very negatively if I were to launch into a kind of heavy, detailed critique of how Wayne Seong represents or misrepresents the history of the abolition of slavery in the United States. However, he doesn't mention it casually or flippantly or in passing. He very seriously, and with allusions to published work, and with the weight of his own academic background as a former professor of law, he really presents in all seriousness his interpretation of the abolition of slavery as setting down the framework for his approach to veganism. Now, there's so much wrong about what he has to say about slavery. Again, I'm not offended in principle that somebody would want to pose a comparison. In some specific sense, somebody might be able to pose an intelligent and interesting set of comparisons between the history of the abolition of slavery and what's going on in veganism right now. But Wayne Seong fails to do that. Instead, you have the sense of a self-righteous and ignorant and cynical misrepresentation of a few select facts here and there that, among other things, completely omit to mention the American Civil War, completely omit to mention the significance of violence and leadership and executive action and so on. I mean, in terms of the misrepresentation he's making of the abolition movement, the American abolition specifically, I mean, to begin with, that's already a question. Like, the way slavery was abolished in Haiti is very different from the way it was abolished in the United States of America. In Haiti, there was a real grassroots slave rebellion, a rebellion from the bottom up, a real revolution. That was how slavery was abolished in Haiti. In the United States, it was a much more peculiar and contradictory balancing act. The Union forces that fought the war to abolish slavery, more than 90% of them were white. This guy named Abraham Lincoln ended up making a coalition of all these abolitionist parties, many of whom had sworn they were pacifist and would never support violence. But then when Lincoln started putting together his plans, soon enough they did indeed support the Civil War and so on. It's a very strange political history. Again, anyone who's sincerely interested in it and was making some kind of intelligent or well-informed commentary on what this has to do with a bunch of vegans on a website trying to start a kind of informal community and to organize street protests against foie gras or against government subsidies for the dairy industry and meat agriculture. It's tenuous at best. It's a real stretch. But sorry, coming back to what use Wayne is making of these historical anecdotes that both have nothing to do with one another and have nothing to do with veganism. The use he makes of slavery, the civil rights movement of the 1960s, gay rights movement, and the Arab Spring. He's using them to support his peculiar view of what used to be called leaderless resistance or acephalous resistance, but that he's here instead presenting as a social network model of protest activism and social change. And I mean, the parts just do not fit. That model he's presenting, which already I have problems with. I mean, if we're having a serious intellectual discussion about activism and social change, already to me, he's setting forth a very problematic and debatable set of ideas, and he's setting them forth as if they were the unassailable conclusions of the social sciences, as if the social sciences have conclusions that work like an objective checklist of here's what to do next for vegan activism. Whereas in reality, the social sciences present us with the most murky, uncertain, and debatable of provisional suggestions based on events that are open to interpretation. I dare not digress to say more on that. This social network theory that he presents with the very casual example of how people on the internet select pop music to listen to, how they choose to listen to one song rather than another song, and without even paying money for it. How possibly do you connect that argument to the decision made by hundreds of thousands of people to fight to the death in the Civil War to bring about the abolition of slavery? Now, I'm well aware that the abolition of slavery was not the only issue in that war. It was not the only reason why people joined the army. However, it was one decisive issue, and I'm here speaking with brevity. What do those two ideas have to do with each other in any way, let alone any of these ideas, like his very facile use of what happened during the Arab Spring, and this model he's putting forth that on the one hand is an idea of community reduced to people giving each other the thumbs up on Facebook, which is not a community. And on the other hand, this sort of contrived outrage of a particular type of street theater, a particular type of protest that, I'm not opposed to. I don't have any agenda against this style of protest. But it doesn't seem to answer any of his stated methodological concerns, because he stated that he was disappointed with the outcomes of the types of political protest and activism he had previously been involved with at the University of Chicago. I think that for him and for Direct Action Everywhere as an organization started a series of questions being asked, and those were good questions to do what we call outcome evaluation in the social sciences, to say, okay, what really gets results and what doesn't. However, it seems to me that Direct Action Everywhere started with all the right questions, and they haven't yet come to the right answers. And that's fine. I mean, the future of the organization may be bright. However, the purpose of this video is to say, when I, as an outsider, look at the case being presented by Wayne Seong, I am turned off. I'm given a negative impression of this organization and what they're about. And I'm sure that's the furthest thing from their minds. I'm sure they don't see anything wrong with what they're saying about slavery, the civil rights movement, etc. And they are very proud of what they have to say about the politics of outrage. But what I see is a tremendously facile, intellectually dishonest approach to the issues. And it doesn't show any sincere interest in or concern for the real history that has a real body count for the issues being invoked. Again, to repeat myself, the Arab Spring, U.S. Civil Rights Movement, and slavery. And it's not out of sensitivity. It's not because people are easily offended that I would ask them to either research those matters more deeply or say nothing of this sort. It's not out of a tendency to censor. It's just out of my sense that, people like Wayne Seong, who seems tremendously confident in the message he's delivering, in my eyes, he's making a fool of himself. Now, to come back to this sort of twinned issue, on the one hand, the methodology of Direct Action Everywhere is supposed to be a community. And I've really got to put a footnote to ask, what do they mean by community? Because it's not what I mean by the word community. And then the other hand, they have this whole praxis of the politics of outrage. And that is ostensibly based on Wayne Seong's analysis, although I think his analysis is worse than what you can hear on CNN, of how it was outrage that sparked the Arab Spring, and it was moral outrage that brought about the abolition of slavery. in the United States of America. Yes, the Civil War had nothing to do with it. Moral transformation. Well, again, as political arguments go, it's certainly common to pick and choose. But yeah, in this case, it's a bit chilling to see the extent of the misrepresentation of these facts to suit his theory. And then beyond that, he has this whole methodology of trying to focus on beliefs rather than behaviors, of saying that presenting people with facts does not bring about changes in outcome, that veganism can't be a facts-based movement. It has to be an ideological movement, a beliefs-based movement. All right, so I have a lot of problems with this. And I'm sure people in Direct Action Everywhere wouldn't expect other vegans to think this is problematic. But I do not regard vegans as people who are united by their beliefs. I regard vegans as people who are actually divided by their beliefs, as people who have tremendously diverse political beliefs, religious beliefs, and so on. And Direct Action Everywhere is not promising something to me that would strengthen the movement, but instead promising to weaken the movement or separate it into smaller parcels with this emphasis on belief and ideology. And now many parts of that ideology are left unstated. Wayne repeatedly alludes to and invokes a very nebulous notion of progressive politics. Well, Wayne, your idea of progressive politics may not be the same as someone who grew up Hindu and who within Hinduism was familiar with the concept that animals' lives are worth something, was taught that cows were sacred, and then at one point figured out that the dairy industry was both unethical in that it exploited cows and caused suffering to them, and bad for the environment, and who made the move from mainstream Hinduism to veganism, let's say an ecologically and ethically motivated veganism. That could be the basis for a real community and for a real political impetus long-term in veganism. I do not think in general that public, which is already significant in countries like the United States and Canada, it's going to be even bigger in India, but Hindus who shift to veganism, they are not going to be stereotypical, progressive, left-wing, liberal, white Americans. They're going to have a very different set of beliefs from you, including very often on issues like gender roles, gender politics, marriage, what kind of hairstyle you should have, and so on. I could insert here, of course, a long set of remarks about Buddhism and the status of veganism within Buddhism. Within the next 20 years, I think there's going to be more action in Hindus becoming vegan than there will be within Buddhism. That's my bet. I think both of those, Hinduism and Buddhism, are going to create much more durable communities or bases for communities than teenagers on the internet who post pictures of themselves wearing balaclavas and posing as armed radicals. If you're a gambling man, you can place your bet too. Sorry, coming back to what I felt were the broadest issues raised here. On the one hand, Wayne Seong and Direct Action Everywhere talk about community, which is problematic, and on the other hand, they're talking about the politics of outrage. And they don't really spell this out. I mean, Wayne just puts up the image of Martin Luther King Jr. and invokes the history of the American Civil Rights Movement. And really what he's doing is calling up the shallowest understanding possible of what the role of outrage was, the politics of outrage in the history of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. He's summoning up an idea of what brought about legal changes and social changes based on still images on the nightly news, the image of policemen beating protesters, the images of outrage of people in the streets being sprayed with hoses, attacked by guard dogs, and this sort of thing. Those moments of outrage, they're often featured in high school textbooks on history. They're featured on the nightly news. But this really does not give you any kind of insight into the substance and the body and the basis of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, why it worked and how it worked, and how they managed to combine people who had very, very different political beliefs into one movement. That is something that vegans should maybe look at and try to learn from. But anyone who's read even one book about civil rights in the United States would immediately recognize that black American churches were a huge part of what made it possible for someone like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to take a lecture tour from coast to coast and move from church to church. Another type of institution that was tremendously important were the black colleges, what we now call historically black universities. Again, these provided real communities, real units of social organization, social capital, if you like that term, that existed before the civil rights movement got underway, and then really provided the stage for the civil rights movement to unfold on. And, those units of social capital were not produced by outrage. And also, I just want to add, as I was saying earlier, they encompassed a tremendous diversity of political beliefs and religious beliefs. Obviously, if you're talking about South Carolina, a lot of those black churches that got involved with the civil rights movement were extremely conservative, and by today's standards might be considered right-wing. On the other hand, on some of the black campuses and in some of the big cities, there were socialist organizations and communist organizations involved with the civil rights movement that were extremely left-wing, and all kinds of other combinations in between. And, part of the civil rights movement was the challenge of getting those people to work together on a particular program. So in the history of the civil rights movement, it's very misleading to just look at this moment of outrage, which is in some ways the end of the process that went on for decades, if not a whole century, of many small, largely unseen political struggles that built up those communities, that built up the levels of trust and cooperation within a church, between a church and its leader, within different social movements. Little struggles that may have included, having a picnic and a raffle to raise money to help someone who was in the hospital and couldn't pay his hospital bills, going and visiting someone in prison, the community organizing to try to get the person a fair trial. Thousands of tiny struggles over decades and building up social cohesion and trust in these types of institutions that were indeed scattered around the whole of the United States, and that the civil rights movement was, to some extent, able to organize and galvanize, partly by doing relatively fun activities. A huge part of the civil rights movement at that time was actually having groups of musicians go from town to town and town to church, and lecturers, including Martin Luther King Jr., often traveled with those musicians, and then, this excited people and got them even more active, involved in the movement. Okay, now my first point was this whole history has nothing in common with the argument for veganism that Wayne Seong is offering. Any parallel to veganism, I think, is very hard to construe, and there is a certain kind of lack of sensitivity and lack of sincere interest in the facts of history in this approach. With that having been said, as soon as we really pose the contrast sincerely, I think what's important for us to recognize is precisely that the type of social capital, the type of community building I've just described, is exactly what the whole vegan movement is lacking, definitely in the United States and Canada. We don't have church groups across South Carolina. We don't have vegan colleges in Georgia. We don't have that. We don't have anything like that anywhere in the world, but definitely not in the United States and Canada. And again, if you were going to look pragmatically and honestly at who might have that, who might have the basis for forming a community and those types of institutions and that type of trust, it will probably be Hindu groups, maybe in a few cases Buddhist groups, that are now making a shift from one type of vegetarianism, maybe more heavily based on supernatural concerns, to another type of veganism, maybe more informed by ecology, ethics, and so on. So I'm not just saying this to kind of heap scorn on the frankly idiotic use of the history of slavery and civil rights that Wayne Seong has made, and that in my eyes gives Direct Action Everywhere a bad name. I'm also doing it to draw attention to this peculiar contrast I see between all of the rhetoric about outrage, about the politics of outrage, about how moral outrage is supposedly going to transform the vegan movement, transform the world, and the promises that Direct Action Everywhere is making about providing a community. I think that's easy to boast of. It's easy to promise and very hard to deliver on. I think if you really thought about it with all due humility, think about how much of a struggle it would be for any vegan organization to even do what a small Protestant church in the American South does for a community in terms of community services and in terms of building cooperation and trust and so on in the community. Good luck. I mean, search all over the internet. Good luck finding any example of a secular vegan organization doing that. And, practically, if you're looking for a community, if you want a community to do for you the things that a community really does, that can include helping you with daycare for your children, through to helping you with a funeral for your grandparents, you can today find that pretty easily through religious organizations, through some cult-like organizations. In the past, probably some left-wing groups would provide you with a community. Not lately so much. I don't think vegans are doing it anywhere in the world. And when I look at the promises of community being made by Direct Action Everywhere, I'm skeptical. I wonder, can they deliver on that promise? And are they taking that seriously? Or is this just another website that says it's going to conquer the world, but doesn't provide you with much more than the links to a couple people's Facebook pages and encouragement to go stand by the side of the road and hold up a sign saying meat is murder? I want to end this by saying, if I did live in a city where Direct Action Everywhere exists, I would happily go to a meeting and meet whoever was involved and just decide on a case-by-case basis, are these people I can work with? Are these people who are trying to make something positive happen? Can I cooperate with them to try to do something positive? And I don't assume that the actual formal definition of Direct Action Everywhere presented by Wayne Seong, I don't assume that it's like a constitution that everyone in Direct Action Everywhere knows. I don't assume that everyone particularly agrees with it or follows Wayne as their great leader. I assume that, like most websites, anyone can sign up, and you probably meet good people, bad people, and all kinds of people who happen to get involved via that website and via that organization. So the point of this video is not to rain on their parade, but maybe if some people at DXE see this and think about it, they'll start to think about how the rhetoric they're indulging in may be alienating some of the people who could be their most highly motivated supporters. When you talk about the Arab Spring, think for a minute about how this would sound to somebody who's a refugee from the Arab Spring living here in Canada now. Think about how it would sound just to somebody who really has some sincere interest in the ongoing politics of that situation, which again is politics of the body count. When you're making these types of very amateurish statements about the history of slavery, how do you think that sounds to someone who really cares about that history? We have this untranslatable idiom in English. It comes with the territory. Good luck explaining the meaning of that phrase to someone born and raised in China, Laos, Thailand, or Cambodia. I think I've tried them all. Really a uniquely American phrase. Really comes out of the American genocidal colonial experience. If you stop and think about it for a minute, you know exactly what kind of territory they're talking about. You know exactly what comes with it. Story I'm covering in this video. Part of it's shallow, and part of it is really kind of deep and profound and might have some application in your own lives. All right. Yeah, you know what? People say bad things about me on the internet. It comes with the territory. I came up as a teenager. I was involved in theater, acting, stand-up comedy, and I knew other people who were at varying degrees of commitment to that lifestyle. And I knew people in Toronto who were part of the hip-hop scene, becoming rappers. I knew a couple people actually in the punk rock scene at that time too. But rap in Toronto was booming. It was huge. Sorry, I mean, I know people don't think of Toronto that way, but really it was another one of those centers for, recording artists. All this stuff was going on. And people come up to you and say, oh, yeah, I love acting. It's my dream. This is what I want to do with my life. But I hate going to auditions. And I hate having people talk about me behind my back and say I'm too fat or I'm too thin or I'm too pretty for this part even. That happens in acting, you want to roll as a gangster or something and you're too pretty to be the gangster role. Whatever it is, Oh, yeah, and I can't stand being judged and I can't stand... And you know what? Maybe you don't like acting because it comes with the territory. If you think you want to be a rapper, but you can't stand to have other people say insulting things about you and your mom and your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your sex life or whatever, if you can't stand to have people insult you in rhyming couplets set to a beat, you know what? If you can't put up with the kind of confrontations that happen on stage and off stage, maybe what you want really is not to be a rapper because it comes with the territory. People are afraid to come on YouTube. People are afraid to come on the internet and keep it real and tell it like it is because they're afraid of this. I got a two-part answer to this, okay? Part of me wants to say, don't be afraid, okay? You know what the truth is, though? You know what the deeper truth is, okay? It's relative to the merit of the content you're producing. If you really think that what you're producing has substance, has merit, that it's still going to be meaningful 5 years from now, or 15 years from now, or 50 years from now, if you think you're coming on the microphone and saying something that is really worth recording and sharing with the world, then you shouldn't be afraid of any of this bullshit. And if and when people step to you, people write to you saying that they think your content is offensive or shallow or evil or should be canceled, you should be in a position to write back to them and say you're damn wrong. I had one person write to me saying that she thought my videos about Hitomi Mochizuki were offensive. It is very likely her opinion was just based on seeing the thumbnail, maybe the title, and not clicking on the video. And I wrote back to her and said, you're wrong. These are really meaningful videos that are talking about this stuff in a sincere and serious way, and I ain't ashamed of them. I'm proud of them. My daughter can watch those videos one day. My daughter's going to ask me about them. I'm cool with that. And this particular person, I don't even think they're an exception to the rule. I don't think they're special. They took a look at what the titles of my videos were. They clicked on them. They listened to them for a couple minutes. Threw it back and they said, hey, you know what? You're right. Hey, you know what? You've got a point. They wrote back and said, hey, I guess I was wrong. You're actually doing something meaningful here. This is the kind of critique that's worth something. I was mistaken. You know what? That happens to me all the time. And it's not always that polite. And it's not always that easy. Okay? One person, wrote into me offended by my video about Rachel Ziegler, vegan activist of DXE. One. So Rachel, if you think your campaign to defame me, denounce me, get me canceled has any traction, one person, one friend of yours wrote to me. And the same script played out in exactly the same way. I'm not ashamed of what I said in this video. I think I'm producing something that's really worthwhile. I stand by this video. My daughter can watch this video one day. My daughter can ask me questions about it. I'm proud of the content I produce. I'm not ashamed. My girlfriend Melissa was in the room when I had a phone call with a dude. This is a white dude from Thailand who was shouting at me because of my video about Nina and Randa from a million years ago. And it boils down to the same thing. What I had to say to him was, what are you talking about? What I said in that video was really meaningful. And he hadn't even seen the video. I've been through that with other YouTubers too, where they jump on a bandwagon. Okay, you tell me who should be afraid of whom in this equation? If you do a book review and you haven't read the book, you should be ashamed of yourself, right or wrong. If by dumb luck you manage to give a really accurate analysis of a book you haven't read, you should still be ashamed of yourself. If you've read the book, right, and if the writer wrote the book, all right, then we're on one level, right? Like one person is being a sincere creator of content and someone else is being a sincere critic, and that's good for everybody. Steel sharpens steel. Everyone in my audience is welcome to criticize me. Everyone is welcome to criticize my YouTube videos, including you, Rachel. Rachel's got her own YouTube channel. I'm happy to hear it. I'm a vegan and an old political science major making his way as an obscure author, ersatz filmmaker, and slightly less obscure YouTuber. Keeping it all the way real. I've interviewed a wide variety of people over the years, vegan and anti-vegan, and I'd be happy to interview you via Skype, presumably, if you've got the time. I don't know if Rachel gets a lot of fan mail, and I don't know if Rachel gets a lot of hate mail, all right? But this is clearly neither one. It's not stalking, it's not harassment, it's not hate mail. It's just two content creators on YouTube, and at least one of the two is trying to keep it real. Her reply, I don't know if I really appreciate the narration in this video, especially laughing about the part that anyone can make a website accusing someone. This is not a video that I want to share or have anything to do with. It doesn't feel like support to me. I don't support anyone. I do research, and then I present an informed opinion. Thus the name and the motto, active research and informed opinion. Her reply... Active research and informed opinion? Well, I'm not interested. Yeah, I guess both of us are keeping it real in this conversation. You dug through old personal photos of mine like a creep. What? She didn't see the video. She didn't even see 2 minutes of the video before making this comment. It's not true at all. Editing out parts of me where I sound stupid and where I'm talking about my insecurities. If you continue to do this, I consider it harassment and I will report your page and publicly call you out. Actually, you know what? I don't need to wait for it to happen again. Period. Bye. Quote, I treat men and women equally. You'll find that I offer critique and cross-examination of the politics of Gary Yourofsky, Gary Francione, and innumerable others, all with the same rigor. And no, there's nothing creepy about research. There's nothing creepy about quoting the front page of the newspaper. It's one of the cheapest points that people try to score on the internet is accusing you of having spent many hours, quote unquote, stalking them or like digging through their old Facebook posts, which again, if you think of yourself as a journalist, there's nothing wrong with that. As a journalist, there's nothing wrong with going out, looking through someone's old Facebook posts to find the image you want to find or find the political statement. I've seen journalists go back 20 years in someone's Twitter history to find the one homophobic comment they made 20 years ago and then make a news story out of it. That is legitimate journalism. But no, that's not what I did. I'll ask you in the audience, have you ever put your own name into Google? This is what you get for my name in Google image search. Could be worse. And yeah, if you put Rachel Ziegler's name into Google image search that week, you got the images that I used in that video. Trust me, I put 5 seconds of effort into putting together the images and the video clips used there. As I told you before, I'm not on anyone's side. I'm not supporting you, nor Wayne Seong, nor anyone else. I do research, and I present the audience with an informed opinion. You know the motto. Apparently she did see that message because I got 2 posts that were unreadable to me. I don't know if she tagged me after she blocked me or what, but those never popped up. And that is the end of the conversation. Why come on the internet? And conversely, why cower like a coward and stay off the internet? Why share your opinions with the world? And why keep your opinions to yourself? The number one reason for privacy is that you are afraid of looking like a fool. Here's the wonderful thing about social media in the 21st century. Nobody else can make you look like a fool. You shouldn't be afraid of Rachel Ziegler. You shouldn't be afraid of Socrates. You shouldn't be afraid of Durian Ryder or Norwegian. I mean, there's a list of people. There is a quantifiable list of people who've tried their hardest to defame me, denounce me, counsel me. Counsel me. There is a finite list of people we could name here who have worked very hard for short periods of time to defame me, denounce me, drag my name through the mud, and in some cases, quote unquote, cancel me. Sometimes making up rumor and innuendo about my sex life and this kind of thing. And guess what? None of it will ever work, because all that anyone has to do to debunk it is click on that link, is take that 1 minute, that 1 second to click over and read whatever my actual article was that I'd written, watch whatever video it was I'd put on YouTube, read the actual statement I'd made in writing, whatever the format might be. None of my critics can make me look like a fool. That's not a power anyone in the audience can give them, and it's not a power I give them myself. The only one on the internet who can make you look like a fool is you. So if you believe that the content you're producing has some meaning and that it matters today and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow for the rest of your life and maybe for your children and grandchildren, if you think you're doing something meaningful, then take that risk, get on the internet, roll up your sleeves, and you can deal with the same mud and blood and calumny and innuendo and cross-examination like every other battle rapper, like every other stand-up comedian, like every other aspiring model and actor who has rumors told behind their back. It's not a risk. It's a certainty. People are going to talk if you are a person worth talking about.
À-bas-le-ciel. You go to the Direct Action Everywhere website and search the word vegan. Up pops Intrinsically Moved. The main reason consumerist advocacy is the wrong approach. You see it. Stop talking about veganism. Then it also says veganism is not cruelty-free. And then it says how the Go Vegan message perpetuates the objectification of non-humans. So I'm really not finding anything positive about going vegan from DXE, Wayne. And I think that before the break, Gary was saying, like, well, what is somebody supposed to do? You know, I mean, you say, okay, well, you want to intervene if somebody's beating a dog on the street. You have 9 billion animals who are being slashed to death. I don't know, do we go to the slaughterhouses and turn off the electricity, or do we go vegan? What does until every animal is free mean to you, and how do we achieve it?
Is standing up in Chipotle and saying it's not food, it's violence. How is that any more, quote, action, end quote, than tabling and spending hours talking to people about why they should go vegan if they regard animals as members of the moral community?
All right, guys, I need to ask you to leave. You're obstructing our business. We have a letter here.
Letter from the CEO, Steve Ells.
Letter, nothing letter to your CEO, Steve Ells.
We have a few short words and an open letter to Chipotle's CEO, Steve Ells.
Steve made an important promise to run his business in a way which would never exploit animals.
We are here to speak up for the countless animals whose lives have been stolen.
Chipotle forces castration and mutilation on non-human animals.
Why is that any more action, Wayne?
It's absolutely not, Gary. And I think they're both very important forms of activism. But I just want to pose maybe a rhetorical question for the two of you. Have either of you actually ever been inside one of these places of violence? One of these hellholes?
I've been in about 30 slaughterhouses, Wayne. How many have you been in?
I've been in probably about 60. And I've investigated many of them, not consensually, but in the cover of night. And when you've been inside of these facilities over and over again, not on a tour, not on a visit, but to identify the most terrible abuses that are happening behind these closed doors, there's something that changed in you. And I was in a Northern California Whole Foods farm just a few months ago, and what you see when you go inside these farms is an urgent and desperate need for action now. Hens that are covered with filth, dying, dozens of them already dead, laying in piles everywhere. hens that can barely even breathe because the air is so filled with sulfur dioxide and filth that it burns their throat every breath they take. And when you see this sort of violence over and over again, it inspires you to action. Because for every one that you save, and we did save a number of these hens from this facility, there are literally thousands who are left behind.
Wayne, come on.
It gives you a sense of just how real this violence is and how important it is to take immediate action. Gary, let me finish. I let you talk and I don't interrupt, so I'd appreciate it if you didn't interrupt me. It inspires you and gives you a sense of just how important it is to take direct and immediate action to rescue these animals. But this is not just an emotional reaction. Because as a social... Gary, could I finish, please, Gary? I've been respectful and tried to let you finish. I just have one thought. Gary, I'm just about done. Can I just finish this one thought? Because this isn't just an emotional reaction when we say we need to take nonviolent direct action and not just settle with veganism. Because as a social scientist who has studied social movements, for the past 10 years of my life with some of the best scholars in the world, I can tell you that nonviolent direct action has the power to change the world. The Underground Railroad brought down the system of chattel slavery when free produce could not. Emmeline Pankhurst's disruptions of Parliament, not education but disruption, brought women the right to vote in the United Kingdom, and from the United Kingdom, the world. And the gay rights movement made progress only when it was willing to take powerful and disruptive collective action.
You have rescued a hen,
I literally have one sentence left, Gary.
And you have
one sentence, Gary.
Okay, Gary, look, Wayne says he has one sentence left, so let him...
So Erica Chenoweth, a political scientist who won the prize for being the best political scientist in 2013, has studied hundreds of social movements over the past 200 years and has said that all you need is 3.5% of the population, at a maximum. 3.5% of the population engage in nonviolent direct action and disruption, and you're guaranteed to win. Most social movements win with far less. So all we need to do is convince 2 out of 100 people to go out there and, yes, disrupt the Chipotle, disrupt the Whole Foods, disrupt the slaughterhouse or a factory farm, disrupt all of them, and we will bring so much attention to this cause that the issue of animal rights will be on the New York Times front page every day of the year.
Going vegan is nonviolent direct action.
The social science, exactly. The social science studies that I've seen talk about 10% of a population, and I'm all in favor of trying to get to 10% so that we can change the conversation. But I think, Wayne, you've simplified those social science findings. But let's not. What I want to talk about is you've rescued a couple of hens, and you post all this stuff, this material that promotes your organization. This idea that you are involved, like on a daily basis, with going and disrupting. All you're doing is standing up in Chipotle saying it's not food, it's violence, and you don't even have a vegan message. You partner with organizations that send public letters to Whole Foods expressing their appreciation and support, including Bruce Friedrich, including PETA, including Farm Sanctuary, including Compassion Over Killing, including Vegan Outreach. These organizations support Whole Foods. Those are the groups that you think we need to build bridges with. Those are the groups that you talk about supporting incremental reform as long as it's sustainable. I mean, Wayne, what are we talking about here? And I'm also looking at animal liberation because astonishingly, Wayne, for somebody who's been studying things for 10 years, you really need to read Animal Liberation. Granted, even here, killing still seems repugnant. An animal may struggle against a threat to its life even if it cannot grasp that it has a life in the sense that requires an understanding of what it is to exist over a period of time. But in the absence of some form of mental continuity, it is not easy to explain why the loss to the animal killed is not, from an impartial point of view, made good by the creation of a new animal who will lead an equally pleasant life. There you go, Wayne. That's animal liberation from way back then. And you're telling me that you use animal liberation because you agree with what Peter Singer said back then. Well, sorry, that's what he said back then. Maybe you ought to think about reading the book and changing the locution, because it's not a matter of terminology, it's a very important matter of substance.
Gary, we can have a debate about what Peter Singer believed in 1975. I think it would be better to ask him directly. But the reality is we are not working with Peter Singer. We are not working with Bruce Friedrich. We are challenging them. I agree completely that welfarism makes people complacent, that there's no evidence that it leads to real improvements for animals in the short or long term. If we want to problematize animal welfare, if we want to problematize the humane meat scam, then we are doing it. And I'm asking you, Gary, what have you done over the past year to problematize the humane myth or to encourage animal rights activists to challenge it? myth.
Wayne, I
And
got
Farm
news for
Sanctuary is
you.
talking about the humane myth.
Foods is
I
full
think
of
that's
meat.
progress we should
Whole
acknowledge.
Foods is full, Wayne, Whole Foods is full of meat. I have news for you, okay? I don't know what you think you've done, number one. Number two, as far as what people in the welfare movement concerned, I can document for you the fact that they have been they talk out of both sides of their mouth. So you can say, well, Ingrid has attacked the humane myth. At the same time that I'm looking at a website from Bell & Evans Chicken where Ingrid is talking about how Bell & Evans has set a new standard for the chicken industry. So they talk out of different sides of their fundraising mouths. I can't doubt that. Indeed, I've been pointing that out for a number of years now. But the idea, what is this idea? What have you been doing to show that the whole humane exploitation thing is a scam? Wayne, I spend every day of my life.
We had an investigation in the New York Times, Gary.
I'm sorry?
We had an investigation of a humane farm that was in the New York Times that over 5 million people around the world saw. And we had thousands of people writing to us saying they were going vegan.
You know what comes out, Wayne? What comes out is that you're attacking the idea that these places are humane. You're not attacking the use you're attacking treatment. Just like MFA does, just like Compassion Over Killing does, just like all of these other groups do. You attack treatment. You don't attack use. The only way you can attack use is to have a vegan message. And you said it before. Well, I copied it down, Wayne. I hope it's an accurate quote. You said, I do not agree that veganism is the moral baseline. Action is the moral baseline. Wayne, I'm sorry. That is absolutely incoherent. You need to have a theory to inform your action. This idea that we don't have to go vegan, that veganism is an impediment to the animal movement, but we need action. What are you talking about? That is incoherent.
Gary, I don't think anyone who's currently involved in DXE thinks veganism is an impediment to the animal rights movement. I know there's some blog posts written by another organizer, and we do allow a lot of diversity of opinion within DXE, but all of us agree that veganism is a necessary condition to achieving animal liberation. But our perspective is just that we have to go beyond that. And again, Gary,
well, let's start with it, though. Can we start with it?
A dog right in front of you. Do you think inaction is enough, or do you think we have to go to something beyond that? And if we do have to go to something beyond that, why not ask people for what we should be asking them for? Action for animals instead of just veganism. Don't let them be happy.
That is action for animals.
Tell them we need to take action for animals beyond what we buy and sell in our own personal lives.
Wayne, why do we need investigations? What do we need to discover? They're killing the animals. Whether they're doing it nicely or whether they're doing it not nicely, they're killing the animals. What do you need investigations for, Wayne? What do you need investigations for, except for fundraising, Wayne? What do you need investigations?
We actually didn't fundraise off that investigation a single dollar. But, Gary, do you believe that humane meat is a scam?
Wayne. You're on radio now. You're telling me that you got no donations for your activist stipends?
We did not put out a single solicitation for funds after that investigation. Not a single one. Our 2014 budget was $4,000, which is $10,000, 10,000 times less than CETA's, 100,000 times less than HSUS.
It's really an astonishing conversation we had here. It seems that, Wayne, you have confirmed your support for Bruce Friedrich and the groups with whom he is associated. What's astonishing to me is how you support him when you're probably rescuing chickens from the conditions he's created with his support, Farm Sanctuary support, all these group support for the Egg Products Inspection Act, and enriched cages are now the humane standard. So go rescue chickens from the conditions created by Bruce Friedrich. Wayne says, first, if our goal is network building, it's absolutely vital to emphasize that our model of activism, building a movement for nonviolent direct action, complements many of the strategies taken by other groups. If we are successful, as I fully expect we will be, our activism will make the lobbying, outreach, and education that Bruce Friedrich does exponentially more effective. Wayne, as I've been trying to say for years, these groups are the meat industry. They are butchers. I don't know how you don't see that, and I don't see why you're not protesting against Bruce for the conditions he created from which you have to rescue chickens.
Nonviolent direct action is the strongest.
Is it more important to be an activist or a vegan if you had your choice?
And if we're confident that we can win the debate, our main objective as activists and as a movement has to be to bring attention to this issue. And with over 200 press articles about our campaigns and investigations over the past year, we have brought a massive amount of attention to this issue, and we're winning that argument.
You're branding, Wayne, and I agree. You're doing a good job of branding. I'm looking at your website where you talk about your groundbreaking investigations, and there's a big, fat, red donate button. So please do not say that you are not fundraising off of your investigations. It's on your page, point number one. Point number two, the idea that, this idea that we can be activists, but we don't have to be vegans is contentless nonsense. It is contentless nonsense.
Did anyone say that, Gary?
I'm sorry?
Did anyone say that?
What?
That we can be activists, effective activists, without being vegan? I don't think anyone said that.
What you said,
I think
Wayne.
What we said is that to be an effective activist, you have to move beyond veganism, Gary.
Wayne, you see, I'm trying to have a discussion, Wayne. I don't want to hear your speeches. I'd like to have a discussion with you.
Fair
and
enough.
I'm trying to have a discussion, and I can't engage you. I have to wait until you get done. So please, let me, if we're going to do it that way, let me get done. What you said was, I do not believe that veganism is the moral baseline. Action is the moral baseline. That's what you said. That's a quote. Do you deny saying that? Because you did. So you tell me how that makes sense to you, because I think that is contentless nonsense.
À-bas-le-ciel.
Every single person in this audience got to know me as a personality first, and then got to know the philosophy, then got to know the political agenda, and then got to know the methods I want to use in pursuit of that political agenda after the fact. Imagine how different it would be if you had encountered à-bas-le-ciel as a faceless, leaderless organization, as a movement with a website asking you for donations that only stated the philosophy, that only stated the political aspirations, and that only stated the methodology, the methods wanted to use, and it completely denied that there was any kind of like cult leader behind it all, where there was just a mask with no face, shall we say. This is the pattern I see again and again and again in veganism as a movement and in the various 21st century ecological movements, whether or not they're specifically attached to global warming, carbon dioxide levels, this sort of thing. You guys may remember my criticism of a totally faceless organization that was called Nation Rising. Right there. What is Nation Rising? It doesn't even sound like a vegan movement. Well, Nation Rising has inexplicably rebranded and retitled itself, quote, Canadians for Responsible Food Policy, close quote. So that's the name of their YouTube channel today. They still have the logo up saying Nation Rising, which is quite understandable because for many years that was the brand they built up. They have not quite so suddenly changed brand as Twitter. Twitter is now X. So I'm looking at the website, the YouTube channel for Canadians for Responsible Food Policy, and it's somewhat amusing to me. I see the X logo. There's the X logo in the corner now instead of the Twitter logo. I assume years from now it will have gone back to using the Twitter logo. People watching this video in the future are like, what? X? What is he talking about? So there have been some bizarre rebranding exercises in technology this year. One of them being Twitter being suddenly renamed as X. Well, okay, so rebrand and renaming, that's one thing. But here's something even more striking. Now there's one person, one personality with one name and one face. And in fact, it's a conventionally good-looking blonde woman who reveals herself as the founder of the group. I noticed she consistently says founder rather than leader, but she is not just the founder. She is, of course, the unelected, self-appointed dictator for life of the movement. And by the way, the majority of nonprofit organizations have a self-appointed, unelected dictator for life. It's kind of an industry practice that's widely accepted. I personally don't accept it, but I'm an eccentric. So, and her name is Jenny Henry. Now, Jenny Henry has absolutely zero charisma. She has absolutely zero interesting ideas about philosophy or politics or methodology or anything else. And she has a video that's coming up on its 1-year anniversary now. You can, if you click on this, I'll give you guys the link. You can see what I mean by saying she's an attractive blonde. I'm not saying, I would assume in her youth, in her prime, she was a much better looking woman than Nina and Randa. Who is that girl? Essena O'Neill. I think she probably in her youth, she was a better looking woman than Essena O'Neill was. And she's a better looking woman now than Essena O'Neill is today. So she's someone who's had a lot of advantages in terms of her appearance. Nevertheless, despite being a good-looking blonde woman in the prime of her life, shall we say, this video, which is not just coming up on its 1-year anniversary, so it says 11 months, but it's a few days short of a 12-month year. It has 77 views, and I think 2 of them are me. Maybe one of them is Melissa. So we should probably say 75 views, and now some of you people will click on it and take a look. So I left a comment saying, look, guys, I get more views on a very boring book review video. What a peculiar pattern. Wouldn't the world be a different place if Jenny Henry up front, if she were the product, if she were the personality, if from day one it had been support Jenny Henry and her mission. And Jenny Henry published a book, perhaps not called No More Manifestos, perhaps called 100 New Manifestos by Jenny, whatever the hell her philosophy or ideology was. And everyone involved knew who and what they were supporting. Again, not just abstract ideals, right? Also specific ambitions, specific objectives, specific methods to achieve those objectives. And I would remind you of my criticism of Black Lives Matter from many, many years ago. Just as important as the methods you say you will use, just as important or more important are the methods you say you will never use, right? Here are things we're going to do. Here are things we refuse to do, right? Like terrorism. There are a lot of things. If you're in politics, you have to make it very clear what you will never do, what you won't get involved in. It can matter much more than the things you will do. Okay, so some number of supporters got involved in this group when it went through a period of being faceless, supposedly leaderless movement. If you guys don't know, I'll write this out for you. There's a bit of academic German, acephalous. So why it is in their early stage, and it's not just an early stage of organization, but also, of course, an early stage of fundraising, of soliciting donations. They want you to imagine that the donations are not going into a particular bank account that has a particular person's name on it, who decides how that money is spent. Now, I will just ask the question. So Jenny Henry, as founder, as a matter of speculation, has she decided what would be done with 100% of the money donated to the group? If she only decided 50% of what would be done with money, who else decided? You know what I mean? Again, some organizations are a husband and wife team. Some organizations are headed by a group of 5 people, and they actually record their roundtable meetings. It's rare. The vast majority of these nonprofits, whether they're explicitly political or they're more of an ecological organization, it's one person, it's one man, and your donations go into one person's pocket. The question is, do you know that person? Do you trust that person? Do you care? Do you respect that person? Are you even fucking interested in that person's ideas? And here's the ultimate question. Do you actually believe anything is going to change in the next 5 years? Because Jenny Henry, you piece of shit, I can look back at what you did in the last 5 years, and I can look ahead in the next 5 years and say it's going to be the same or it's going to be worse. All right? And I'll tell you one thing right now about Jenny Henry. Jenny Henry will never record a podcast with me. She will never record a YouTube video on this channel. She will never participate in anything that à-bas-le-ciel that this channel has going on, which is significant. In case you think there's a whole hell of a lot of talent in this vegan demi-mon for the world, I think there's a lot of talent in Canada. There's a lot of talent in Ottawa. I mean, Jesus Christ. Think about all the brilliant people she could have worked and collaborated with in, say, just the last 3 years, right? Think of all the people whom she could have sent an email to or who she could have replied. No, okay. So that's Jenny Henry and the so-called Canadians for Responsible Food Policy. All right. There used to be an organization called Animal Rebellion. Now, this is a uniquely British phenomenon. If there were an organization in Canada doing what Animal Rebellion did, the leaders of that organization, the representatives of that organization, would not be interviewed on mainstream television, would not be featured on mainstream radio, would not be promoted on the front page of newspapers. In England, unlike many other political cultures around the world, actually, those people get a whole hell of a lot of promotion out of legacy media, is now the term I see being used, non-internet based media, old-fashioned media. I find this astonishing in many ways. So Piers Morgan in England has made Animal Rising famous. Nevertheless, on the YouTube channel, here's a video from 2 months ago that has 413 views. 1 month ago, they managed to get one with 1,100 views. And then the next one after that is 588 views. Their most recent video has only 357 views. So they are on mainstream radio, mainstream television, mainstream newspapers, and still. Now, here's the thing about Animal Rebellion. Animal Rebellion is not called Animal Rebellion anymore. They also have undergone a rebranding exercise. They have renamed themselves Animal Rising. Animal Rising. And they have revealed, what a surprise, beneath the seemingly professional, dehumanized exterior of their former website, there actually always was one woman who was their great leader all along. There was one, a reasonably good-looking, not charismatic, not intelligent woman who is, again, the founder and leader of Animal Rising. So this big reveal came 3 months ago. So you guys might be, this is an incredibly boring video. I'll send it to you now. Now, again, some number of thousands of people signed up to support Animal Rising back when they were called Animal Rising. Some number of thousands of people donated some number of thousands of dollars. I don't know how much or how little money they have. You can get some indication in the UK. Maybe you can, maybe you can't actually for any given charity. Maybe you can get a financial report. Maybe you can find how much money they collect in donations. All right? Okay. But this organization, up until 3 months ago, you couldn't really ask a supporter, a donor, who are you donating to? You could only ask them, what are you donating to? You couldn't ask, who are you supporting? You could only ask, what are you supporting? And the answer they could give you, if they donated $1,000 to this group, 1,000 British pounds, whatever you want to say, they would have to say, oh, yeah. I donated because I support this philosophical ideal, because I support this political objective, or I support these methods, these means that are to be used in the pursuit of that objective. It was a mask without a face. There was a logo, there was a slogan, there was a philosophy, even if it was half a paragraph long, a few sentences of philosophy, not much philosophy, right? I would ask you, would you say a similar pattern happened with Black Lives Matter itself? The Black Lives Matter at one stage was an abstract idea, and then it was revealed who exactly the particular people were behind it and what actually was happening with the money, whose bank account this went into. Beyond the abstract ideals, there were particular people with particular bank accounts making particular decisions. Now, again, I'm asking you to kind of reflect on this. Yes, you. Not not that many people are going to see this video. We have 12 thumbs up and 4 people who haven't hit thumbs up for some reason. At this moment, there are only 16 people in the audience. It's a totally unannounced, spontaneous live stream. How would you feel if I had played the game by these same rules? if you had gotten to know my ideas before you got to know me, if you had become a supporter of my agenda without knowing the incredibly eccentric character behind it all, right? And you guys know the good and the bad about me. There are things about me you may find alarming, you may find terrifying. I just say, what kind of political leader do you want? Do you want someone who makes you feel comfortable? Do you want someone who makes you feel challenged? What kind of teacher do you want? Let's just say, so we got the Latin books in the background. So that was the moment. We've been both looking at Latin today, at studying Latin. If you want to talk about ancient Greek, ancient Latin philosophy, Thucydides, Herodotus, Sallust, take your pick. Do you want a teacher, just a form of philosophy and political philosophy that isn't that dangerous? We're not talking about burning down the House of Parliament or anything. We're talking about ancient Greece, ancient Rome. You want a teacher who makes you feel comfortable? You want a teacher who makes you feel challenged? I could say this about anything. Studying Chinese. You're learning a foreign language like Chinese, which is hard work. You want to feel comfortable? You want to get uncomfortable, all right? Say again, I know this is seemingly off topic, but some of you know exactly why I'm saying this. When you look back at the history of drastic political change, whether it was accomplished with or without a revolution, when you look at sudden, drastic political change, sudden, drastic cultural change, okay, the leaders of those movements, the people who pressed for that change and the people who accomplished it, right? Who has suffered less? Right. I know it's real hard for some of you to tune in and hear me say that, I don't know, you're lazy, you're self-indulgent, you've devoted your life to owning and walking a dog and drinking alcohol and playing video games, and none of that's going to change. I know that's really hard to listen to, but in the history of the world, the people who actually made a difference, the people who actually changed things, especially when we're talking about sudden, drastic social change, they were the people who were willing to get uncomfortable. Sometimes they're people who slept in caves, people who slept on the kitchen floor or what have you. Anyway, and a lot of time they're people who died. They lived under uncomfortable circumstances, and they died under uncomfortable circumstances as well. So if it's just too much to ask to even think these things through, if you're that uncomfortable with my personality, I'm comfortable with alienating you. I'm comfortable with alienating that larger audience, because those are people who lack the dynamism to make any kind of change, even a creative change, even to be involved in comedy, even to be involved in writing and illustrating new children's storybooks, even to be involved in cultural production, let alone some kind of sudden, drastic political change. As I say, another important category is sudden, drastic cultural change. So the two people I was just looking at, they're both quite attractive women. So one, the leader of Nation Rising under its new name, the other, the leader of Animal Rising, formerly Animal. You think? What do you think? You think they have what it takes to get on stage and be a stand-up comedian? I'm not even asking you. Do you think they've read Herodotus? Do you think they've read Thucydides? Do you think they've read Plutarch? Like, do you think they're really on some very high level of political and philosophical sophistication or something? I'm not asking that question. I'm asking, do you think they have what it takes to write a children's storybook, a really great children's storybook, to be a filmmaker, to do something creative and positive in that sense, much less, right, to be a revolutionary leader with stark, bold new ideas? Now, guys, we were all young once. Can you remember the first time you ever heard of direct action everywhere? DXE, direct action everywhere. Direct action everywhere, when they started playing this game, were a completely faceless, acephalous, leaderless organization. Or so they said, or so they claimed, or so they pretended to be, right? So many thousands of people supported that group. Many thousands of people donated money to that group. The last time I checked, their annual budget was over $1 million a year. I don't know what it is now. I haven't checked for a couple of years, actually. Okay. But they built up more and more money until they had a budget of more than $1 million a year. A lot of money, a lot of support. People committed to supporting that organization during a period when there was the illusion that it was a fully horizontal organization, that they had no leaders at all. And guess what? It turned out there really was one man in charge. There really was one founder. There really was one leader. And ultimately, there really was one bank account, right? Plot twist. So let me ask. I'm doing the thought experiment. How many of those people would have ever cared about Extinction Rebellion? How many of those people would have ever cared about DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, if they'd never played that game? They'd never had the period of being a mask without a face. If from day one, it was one man, he is a man, all in all, take him for what it is, right? What if from day one, it was just Wayne Xiong with his little measure of brilliance and his little measure of charisma, right? With his philosophy, with his political theory, his analysis, right? What if you were judging him? What if you were trusting him and not a set of disembodied ideas, a disembodied abstract cause that's supposedly everywhere and nowhere at the same time, like Jesus? In this sense, Wayne Xiong is not like Jesus. There are some ways I concede in which he's very much like Jesus, actually, but not in this respect. And again, I want to ask you, how differently would you regard me if I had emerged in this same way? You know, first as this mask without a face, and then suddenly, jarringly, it's revealed to you who is the face behind this organization. Now, I've asked you the question. Some of you are casting your mind back, and remember this, some of you are. Can you remember the first time you ever heard of Direct Action Network? They received money, to my knowledge, from day one, but from a very, very early stage. They received money from the founder of PETA, Ingrid Newkirk, the founder and the most famous leader that PETA has ever had. Admittedly, there was more than one founder at the beginning, but Ingrid Newkirk has become the main leader, the main voice and face for PETA for many, many, many years. Okay. They actually received money, a significant amount of money at the start phase from Ingrid Newkirk. And from day one, they were saying, what we're going to do is completely different from anything PETA ever did before. I wouldn't quite say they were hating on PETA, but they were very vocal and very active in saying, look at the methods PETA has used. That's not effective. That doesn't work at all. What we're doing, this is new era thinking. Do you know that term? This is new era thinking. The old era of PETA is over. We have this fundamentally new, fundamentally different method from anything that's been done before. Therefore, it's going to work. Therefore, everything now is going to be different. Okay, here we are in 2023. The methods used by Direct Action Everywhere are absolutely identical to those used by PETA. They do not have any new ideas. But their claim, the claim on which they recruited volunteers, in which they recruited several $1 million, I don't want to exaggerate, but several $1 million in donations. And apparently, again, to my knowledge, the donors included Ingrid Newkirk. I don't know how much she gave in total. Someone whose career was tied to PETA. The premise was that what they were doing was fundamentally, categorically different from any ecological movement that came before, any vegan movement that came before, and that it was going to be more effective than any movement that's come and gone before, because they alone had done the social science research. They alone had learned the lessons of history. It was an objective fact established and proven by social science research that what they were doing was going to be effective, was going to change the world, was going to change the planet, right? And again, incongruously, these bold new ideas, they didn't come from one man. It didn't come from someone you could interview, someone you could question. It didn't come from someone where you could read his book and say, oh, I've read his book. I know his proposal. I know his idea. Or you could even read his essay, read his article, right? There was this early stage where it was a mask without a face, supposedly an acephalous, egalitarian, fully horizontal organization, right? And then what's revealed in the end, of course, it looks more like a cult leader. That's what it looks like. Oh, guess what? You know, Wayne Seong and his sister, you know, they're the ones with the control of the bank accounts. And, you know, guess what? It's not so egalitarian. Now, it is remarkable. Wayne Seong eventually retired from his position. And it's now a younger woman who's in charge of direct action. Wayne Seong had this much charisma. I mean, to me, he's a very stupid guy. I don't think he's a well-spoken guy. I'm just being blunt. In one word, I think he's an idiot. Nevertheless, he was replaced by a younger woman who is even less charismatic. So if Wayne Seong had this much charisma, she's a straight up zero. I would not say, by the way, that she's stupider than Wayne. Wayne's stupid. But remember, I keep putting this out in three categories. They're kind of philosophical ideas. There are political aspirations, political ambitions, political things objectives, things you want to attain. And then there are the methods you're going to use and the methods you're going to refuse to use. What she lacks is any concept of a new or different method. And that's what it comes down to. What it comes down to is, what are you doing this weekend? What are you doing next Monday? What are you doing 3 months from now? It ultimately, it all has to come down to methods. Now, I've been talking about very, very direct forms of political engagement here, but I would just point out, it's the same with filmmaking, right? So guys, let's just say, okay, we now have 22 people in the audience. We could do a quick poll. Hey guys, what's your favorite vegan documentary? What's your favorite film that promotes veganism? We'll get a whole bunch of examples. So I don't know, the Earthlings thing, Forks Over Knives, the one about athletes, the one about the Cowspiracy, the one about water pollution. Okay. So okay, and now let me just say, look, we'd have to be face to face in a cafe. Well, let's say I sit there and say to you, if I give you 6 months, do you think you can come up with a better storyboard for a film than that? Notice I didn't say a better idea for a film. I said a better storyboard, right? The storyboard means you've thought about it minute by minute, what's in this film. So the storyboard, if people are just talking to each other, that's easy to storyboard. But when you have fight scenes or science fiction, special effects or something, then it gets quite detailed, what you got to storyboard. Okay, if I give you 6 months, you don't think you can come up with better? See, now we're not talking about philosophy. We're talking about methods. So do you actually have a method you're bringing to filmmaking? Do you have means, techniques, right? Not even ideas. Do you have methods that will make a better film, whether it's documentary? And you know what? I think all 20 people in this audience who've given this video a thumbs up, I think all of you are smarter than the creators of Cowspiracy. Every single fucking one of you. Again, I don't know if 200 people will see this video or 2,000. Safe estimate would be 1,000. Probably this will reach 1,000 people. Regardless. So if 1,000 people see this video, probably 800 of you or something. I don't know, 200 of you. 200 of you legitimately have to look in the mirror after watching this video and say, nope, I just can't do it. I ain't got no ideas. I can't improve on Cowspiracy. There's nothing to offer. But for real, like, again, you see how I'm setting the bar here? I didn't ask you, have you read Herodotus? Have you read Thucydides? Have you read Cicero? Do you have something intelligent to say about it? I didn't ask that. I didn't ask, can you offer a better analysis of the origins of the American Constitution and the way in which it does and doesn't relate to ancient Greco-Roman philosophy than me? That's not what I asked. Again, it's interesting to ask that question about Wayne Xiong, about the former leader of Direct Action. It's interesting to ask that about the current leader of Extinction Rebellion, of Animal Rebellion, now called Animal Rising, of Nation Rising. I think that is an interesting question to scrutinize the person, the man, the woman, what have you. It's an interesting question to ask. But I'm setting the bar way the fuck lower here, right? And, I'll just give you another example. For many of you, you haven't looked at these books in many years. Any book by Dr. Seuss, I don't really care which one. We could take the one with Oobleck. So you remember that one? The one with Oobleck, it's a Dr. Seuss story, and it's a very clear allegory for deforestation, pollution, ecology. If you go back and read that as an adult now, if I give you 6 months, can you storyboard a better book, better children's story book dealing with ecology? Can you come up with a better idea for film? I don't think any of you will be intellectually intimidated by Dr. Seuss. Okay? Dr. Seuss was not a genius. And let me just mention 2 more names who come up again and again and again in this literature, the literature of current leaders in the vegan movement and in the ecological movement. I don't know if a single one of you is stupider than Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi was an idiot. Okay? Martin Luther King Jr. All right, I'm well aware of the symbolic significance Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has in the history of the United States of America. Just like Mohandas Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., I don't think he was morally a good person. I don't think he was intellectually an impressive person. And again, have you as an adult gone back and listened to his sermons? Really? I mean, I know, like in both cases, what do you respect about this guy? That he died? That he got killed? Like, is that the basis for your respect for him? I get it. Obviously, I support political equality for African Americans, for Black people in the United States. Of course I do. Of course I do. But if you ask me, do I think the members of my audience should look back at the intellectual achievements of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and think, wow, man, there's just no way. There's no way I can fit into those shoes. And guess what? If you start doing the research, you're going to figure out you're smarter than Cicero. You're going to figure out you're smarter than Thomas Jefferson. You're going to figure out you're smarter than the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution and founded the United States of America. Here I am in Canada. What the fuck am I going to say? The people who wrote the fucking Constitution of Canada? You think anyone is intellectually impressed with these people? And now what? What happens when you realize someone like Wayne Xiong isn't smarter than you? I mean, should I even mention Paul Bashir, like the other vegan leaders who are out there who don't remotely pretend to be intellectual? Do any of you think you're stupider than Paul Bashir? And again, just to these 3 categories. They're philosophical ideas. There are more specific, like actionable political objectives, aspirations, ambitions. So philosophical ideas, political objectives. And then there's the question of methods. And each and every one of these movements, whether vegan or non-vegan, I'm going to talk about Extinction Rebellion in a moment. Extinction Rebellion is non-vegan, but it's an ecological movement. They came in on the basis of very particular promises that their method was going to work. It was going to work like nobody else's method had ever worked before. And again and again and again. I just heard Roger Hallam talking about this earlier today. Roger Hallam is still playing the same, dealing out the same deck of cards. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. He is placing the same cards on the table. And guess what the point is? He's pointing at that card, and then he's pointing at himself. And he's telling you to open up your wallet and donate money to him because he's so fucking special. Because he's so superior to you, the same way Martin Luther King Jr. supposedly was, the same way Mohandas Gandhi was. I've said this again and again through my whole career. I am not concerned about the weakness of our leadership. I am concerned about the weakness of the followership. What the fuck is wrong with you people? What the fuck is wrong with people who donate money to James Aspie? What are you donating money to? And I could say this again for Paul Bashir, and I could say this again for Direct Action Everywhere. I could say this again for all these fucking movements, right? Now, to be fair, to argue against my position, the best possible answer, and for some of you this will be true, for some people who see this video, for some of you this would have been true 5 years ago and it's not true today, for some of you it's true today. If you really look in the mirror and you dig around your heart of hearts, the truth is that what was there for you to believe in was a method. These people promised you they had a method that was better than PETA. You already know PETA doesn't work. That's why you don't donate money to PETA. All right? They promised you they had a method to change the world. So for me, one of the clearest examples of this, although all of the theory and rhetoric is very, very similar to Wayne Xiong, which is to say Direct Action Everywhere, the founding rhetoric and methodology of Extinction Rebellion, right? Sort of season 1 Extinction Rebellion, when they first came out of the gate, and as they say themselves proudly, within 6 months they had 200,000 members and all this support. And the British mainstream press is totally to blame for this. They were in the newspapers, and their acts of civil disobedience were richly rewarded with publicity by legacy media, by old media, whatever you want to say. Their own YouTube channel doesn't get that many viewers. It's really newspaper, radio. They get interviewed on mainstream television, on breakfast TV programs, serious news journals, and so on. They keep getting promoted this way by old media within the United Kingdom. In Canada, that would not happen. It doesn't happen. In some other culture, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar. If you think you pull this shit off, even Hong Kong, you think the pro-democracy protesters who use disruption as their method in Hong Kong are appearing on breakfast television or being interviewed by TV in Hong Kong? No. How many of them are still alive? How many of them are in jail? There are cultures where this is not rewarded. And Roger Hallam is always getting arrested and brought into court. All these different things. It's interesting sort of tightrope they're walking in terms of doing blatantly illegal activities. But Extinction Rebellion, just like Wayne Xiong at Direct Action Everywhere, right? The method you were donating money to was the myth of disruption. All right. There's a very, very small kind of playlist of seemingly respectable social science citations that are offered here, including Erica Chenoweth. Jesus, this is the most laughable shit. And again, I won't tell the story at length because I've told the story before. The one time I spoke to the founder and leader of Extinction Rebellion, Roger Hallam, which was via a Skype-like, long distance thing, what I pointed out to him was that Erica Chenoweth's thesis and his whole hypothesis about disruption and pro-democracy movements, that empirically it was blatantly untrue. That simply you are referring to the Arab Spring as a success when it was a failure and a disaster. Have you been to Libya lately? Anyone in the audience been on vacation in Libya? Have you been to Syria lately? Even Egypt is pretty fucked up. How did the Arab Spring turn out for people who are actually in the countries that were part of the Arab Spring? You have no fucking human heart. How did your fucking Arab Spring methods? How did the pro-democracy movement go in Myanmar? How did it go in Hong Kong? And right at that moment, when I was talking to Roger Hallam, the Hong Kong thing was ongoing. And I said, look, just a few months from now, if you really believe in this, you believe in this stuff, what do you predict? What do you think is going to happen in Hong Kong? Do you really believe these methods, this disruption? Because he himself, I hadn't put the words in his mouth. I didn't say Hong Kong is a great example of your theory that proves that it works, or that Hong Kong is a great example of your theory that proves that it does not work. That's what he said. He put forward Hong Kong, right? And again, same with Wayne Xiong, all these people, Arab Spring, Hong Kong, etc. This is all based on lies. Now, I've talked about this in other videos. If you go deeper, there are also lies about the Vietnam War. There are some other lies. There are lies about Mohandas Gandhi. There are lies about Indian independence. There are lies about Martin Luther King. There are lies about how segregation ended in America. There are lies about the civil rights movement and what actually made the difference and what worked. Guess what? The assassination of JFK turned out to be a really important thing in the history of America. What a surprise. Guess what? The question of who was president of the United States mattered more than sexy teenagers standing on a road chanting slogans. Like, guess why the Vietnam War ended? Not because of sexy teenagers wearing body paint doing nude protests in Central Park in New York. It's just not true. So there are a lot of lies. There are lies on top of lies on top of lies here. And I just want to add, these are not left-wing lies. The right wing is fucked up by all the same shit. And when you look at the right wing, they're using the same methodology, right? They're just the same. They're phony revolutionaries who are soliciting donations on the internet by taking photographs themselves doing disruption. There is no difference in tactics whatsoever. Guys, if you have something intelligent to say no. I did a couple interviews with a notorious YouTuber called Vegan Cheetah. He's back now. His YouTube channel was gone for many years. There is now a YouTube channel again called Vegan Cheetah. And some of you might have a memory of this, but I had put forward this idea that comes from the largely forgotten political philosopher and revolutionary Louis-Auguste Blanqui. And one of the things I've said it various times, but I don't say it often. In the last 10 years, have I said this 4 times or something? But, once in a while I point this out, that, communism existed before Karl Marx, and various kinds of anarchism, various revolutionary philosophies were, in the air at that time. And, Karl Marx took the left wing off in a very particular direction with a very particular set of delusions. And there's no inevitability to that. One of his rivals, direct rivals, alive at the same time and involved in the revolution at the same time, was Louis-Auguste Blanqui. Now, the most striking difference between Louis-Auguste Blanqui and Karl Marx is that when Louis-Auguste Blanqui looks back at the history of Europe and the history of the world, he says, oh, do you know what really matters? You know what makes a difference? Conspiracies. The way to change the world is through an elite, top-down conspiracy. It's not through protests on the street. It's not through peasants, mobs of peasants rising up and protesting. It's not even mobs of peasants that rise up and burn down the castle or something. That's not what matters. And of course, there are a lot of strengths to this theory, because generally, even if a bunch of peasants get angry and burn down the castle, who takes over power in the chaos that ensues? It's normally a conspiracy. There may be several conspiracies that compete in a civil war or something, but it's actually a very strong argument. Now, I'm not going to argue to you that every significant change in the history of the world political was because of a conspiracy. But if we were having this conversation in 1963, the year today is 2023. 1963, he's like, you know what the problem is? We have a Christian-dominated society that's intensely homophobic. And really, we have to shift towards a kind of equal rights paradigm for gay marriage and inclusion of gay people inside, where gay people can have a job and not be worried of being fired because they're homosexual. We have to have a kind of honest and open approach to gay rights. How do you want to accomplish that between 1963 and 2023? Do you think it's going to be a bunch of sexy teenagers in Central Park who paint flowers on their body and dance around? Do you think, wow, well, look at these hippie flower child? I've got the chronology partly wrong. Probably 68 would be a better year to be talking about that. 63, I think that stuff would have been just getting started. 63 is more hula hoop. 68 is more flower children in the park doing political protests. But in any case, so bear with me. Endure my historical inaccuracies here if you want. You know what? If what we want is to really fundamentally change the world, we want to fundamentally, drastically change the world politically, we want to fundamentally, drastically change the world culturally, you know what? What we really need is a conspiracy of highly talented people. We're going to need lawyers. We're going to need documentary filmmakers. Start coming up with things. What kind of people need to get organized? And how many? 20 people, 50 people? How many do you need? People who are sincerely concerned and well-intentioned about how to change the status of homosexuals within the United States of America or globally. How are you going to bring that about? Okay, got another example for you. Let's say you're in Italy in 1983, and it's the same question. How are you going to transform Italian society? And by 1983, the gay rights thing has already made a lot of progress in the United States of America, but Italy is behind. Italy, the progress of feminism was much later in Italy. The progress of gay rights, everything's a little bit behind. How are you gonna transform? So, oh, I know. Let's do the same shit PETA does. Let's have naked women standing on the fucking sidewalk. Are you kidding me? Okay, Roger Hallam's Extinction Rebellion, naked women standing on the sidewalk. PETA, naked women standing on the sidewalk. Direct Action Everywhere, naked women standing on the sidewalk. The intellectual bankruptcy of these movements. I think you can see it philosophically, I think you can see it politically, but in this third category of methods, right? That's ultimately what counts. And that's ultimately what your fucking money is paying for, is the method and the mythology that lets you talk yourself into believing it's going to make a difference, and it's going to make a difference like nothing else ever did before. Any of these fucking movements and any of these fucking people, what do you think they're going to do in the next 5 years? I can look back at the last 5 years and see what they did. Then I can look forward. And I'm asking you right now, what the fuck is going to happen to me in the next 5 years? And each and every one of you really has a say in that right now. If Melissa and I have a newborn baby, I got other priorities, guys. This is reality. I don't know. Here's a hypothetical scenario. If I become the manager of a trailer park, there's a job I'm qualified for. It's something that doesn't even require I become the kind of handyman and overseer of a trailer park. Mr. Leahy, wasn't that his job? If you don't know who Mr. Leahy is, this is a cultural reference here in Canada. Anyway, so if I become the manager of a trailer park and Melissa gets pregnant and we start raising a kid, okay, my options get real narrow for the next 5 years. And some of you might write to me and say, hey, I read your book and I'm so inspired. I want to do this, this, and this. And I say, look, bro, I only got a few hours on Sundays or something. 1 day a week, I got a few hours. But the rest of the time, I'm here sweeping up leaves at the trailer park. I'm here maintaining the trailer park and raising my kid in poverty, in third world conditions, first world country. It's not all bad. I hear very good things about trailer parks from Lauren Southern, for example. She has a very good time. She's raising a baby on a trailer park right now. Shout out to Lauren Southern, who I presume is somewhere in Nanaimo, somewhere quite close by where we are. I'm sure someone in my audience will dox Lauren Southern. I've never Googled exactly where she is, but she's somewhere close by to where we're living right now, on a trailer park, raising her kid in the forest. Anyway, I may take on other responsibilities, right? But actually, in the last 5 years, all of you have had the opportunity to very decisively change the trajectory of my life, what's going on with me. And you do right now. Maybe for the last time, maybe not. We will see. The memory I was conjuring up, I'm sure most of you don't remember that interview, and I did several interviews with Vegan Cheetah back in the day, is that it was striking to me that someone like him, someone who, as he put it, he himself claimed that he never read books except when he was in jail. He read the Game of Thrones books when he was in jail. That someone at his low level of learning, when I told him about this contrast between Louis Auguste Blanqui and what happened with the left wing generally, that he got really excited. He got really interested. Why? Why is it so interesting and so exciting for someone like him? Because it takes the potential for political change. It takes the potential for radical, fundamental change out of the hands of a faceless mob of millions of people and puts it into the hands of small groups of people with particular faces and particular names and particular talents and a particular role to play, right? And on some level, we all fucking know that's true, all right? The American Revolution didn't happen because of a faceless mob of millions.
It happened because of a couple very eccentric guys. I mean, the single most important, obviously, is frankly Benjamin Franklin. Now, Benjamin Franklin was of extraordinary. You can very easily say the American Revolution wouldn't have happened or wouldn't have happened what it did without Benjamin Franklin. You can list off the other people involved who were crucial in giving it its direction and quality in its early years. And there's a famous quote from Adams that to understand what happened in the American Revolution, you have to look at the 15 years before any of the fighting happened. You say, no, you're quite wrong to look at the period of the so-called revolution itself. That doesn't matter. That's just war. But it's in the 15 years before what happened in the newspapers, what happened in the intellectual discourse. That's the real revolution that happened, was the intellectual side of it. And it's not that many authors. It's not that many guys. There weren't that many people with brains who made that difference. So, guys, thank you for giving the video a thumbs up. We have 31 people here. We should have 31 thumbs up. I invited you a relatively long time ago. If you had anything intelligent to say, to say it. Oh, Thomas Paine. I roll my eyes. Of course you're right. Of course you're right. I just despise Thomas Paine. But yep, Tom Paine, one of those guys for sure. A lot of the other founding fathers also despised Thomas Paine. Yeah, some other highly intelligent comments here. Quote, everybody Wayne Seung tonight. Everybody have fun tonight. I wouldn't be surprised if he used it as a campaign song back when he was standing for election. You know, another great comment. Quote, okay, ignorance, confidence, and naked women. Success is sure. So, So, hey, babe, I should open up to you. So, I mean, look, Melissa, in some ways, she's the worst person to ask about these things because none of it's new for her. Melissa and I talk a lot off camera. I mean, you've heard so much of this for so many years. But, at this moment, do you have anything, that's on your mind that way? Sure. No, I'm up to you. You look good. Come on.
I guess the main thing that I wanted to say is that I do find it inspiring to hear you say that, we can take the power away from the faceless mob and put it into the hands of, a small group of people. And additionally, I like this idea that, if you look at many of these names, which are from a young age, you hear that they're, they're brilliant, important people, that you just have the boldness to say, no, they weren't brilliant. And you yourself might be more brilliant. You might have better ideas. So, it's just actually making it happen is the step that a lot of people never get to. And, but I just, I wanted to say, in my reading of history too, I've also really been shocked again and again at just how bad many of the people were who become famous, who become well known, how morally despicable I find them, and just even in my own personal life, just how untrustworthy this person turned out to be.
We've been using American example, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire. We could use other examples. It's kind of appalling when you look at it.
Exactly.
His so-called geniuses and so-called paragons of virtue morally.
So realizing that this is your opportunity, and I agree. Like, this is a moment where somebody could really influence Eisel's life, and by extension my life as well. But you've been talking about this for months and years, even the crisis that you've been in, and it's this is an opportunity if somebody
my crisis is their opportunity.
And it's just I don't want to be too much of a downer here, but when you were saying like how many people who are listening to this, who are watching this, would not be able to come up with a storyboard better than Cowspiracy, or write something better than Dr. Seuss story if they have 6 months to come up with an idea for it. Well, you've been doing this for 9+ years, so it's just hard to recognize that you've been saying these inspiring things for so long. And
and the irony is, I'll tell you someone right now who can't come up with a better idea in 6 months. James Aspey. I'll tell you someone else, so-called Ask Yourself, Isaac Brown. Like, I'll tell you someone else, Richard Burgess, Vegan Gains. Like, Tofu Goddess. Like, the irony is that, like, what I feel are the minority of people who lack that ability have very much been on stage, front and center. They've been the 1% with the opportunity. And, apparently, a great example would be Cosmic Skeptic. Whether it's due to stupidity or other factors, Cosmic Skeptic can't either. So, it is remarkable how consistently the wrong people.
And so much of the time, it turns out that people who have a certain amount of fame or respect to them from their audience, it turns out that Cosmic Skeptic is a good example of this. He comes out as ex-vegan, he comes out as basically describing himself as a very vulnerable person, and explaining that his life is just in such a bad, whatever is going on in his life, it's so bad that he's
he hasn't even told his parents about it. Unspecified crisis he wouldn't even tell his parents about.
Right. Yes. So it really seems like everybody who has been in power just can't get over whatever personal crisis they have and do something positively. So
great.
Those were my thoughts.
So the final thought I want to share with you guys is this. When I talk about this three-way contrast, there's kind of the philosophy, the political agenda, political aspirations, and then the methods. Veganism itself is a method. It's the ultimate tragedy, right? What do you want? What's your real objective? Now, again, this is really where you get into the difference between left and right. I actually want democracy, like really, really genuinely. Be with you, whether it's the left wing or the right wing. How interested is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in democracy? Really, I'm sorry. A lot of people are really comfortable with the absence of democracy. You're saying, I'm not saying everything's bad about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. A lot of people benefit from the undemocratic aspects of our society as it now stands. I have never heard AOC talking about the importance of direct democracy. I have never heard her say, the problem with the war in Afghanistan is that there wasn't a referendum asking the American people if they wanted it, and then maybe 4 years later or 2 years later or whatever it should be, and then asking them again if they still wanted it. Now, we all know, if you're old enough to remember, if you had a referendum on September 15th, 2001, the vast majority of Americans would have voted yes to start a war, whether with Afghanistan or whoever you pointed the finger at. Just a few days after September 11th, okay, but what about in 2006? What about in 2011? At what point had Americans had enough of invading and conquering Afghanistan, or invading? At what point would they have voted to conquer Iraq? Would they have voted for the aggression Trump carried out against Iran? Would the American people vote to have a war right now in Ukraine? I've never once heard, just to give a specific example, I've never seen or heard any interest whatsoever from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez about real democracy. Okay, and again, real democracy, partly it goes back to Athens, partly it goes back to Rome, partly it's ancient, but it's partly a modern and ongoing concern right now. Have I ever heard any vegan other than myself raise the question of who elected Wayne Sion, of democracy within veganism? I mean, it's come up very briefly, repeatedly in this video, the issue of the unelected, self-appointed dictator for life for these organizations and how they raise money and so on. Guess a dollar is not a ballot, guys. It's really different. If it's just whoever has the most money that's in charge, then it starts to sound a lot more like a business, or a lot more like a religion, a lot more like a cult. We don't elect the leaders of religions. We should. I've always asked that question. Why don't you have an elected rabbi? Jewish people in a given neighborhood or whatever can elect their rabbi, and then they decide the rabbi is no good and elect somebody else. Why not? But that's not our tradition in the Western world. For a Buddhist temple too, for any other religion, why not? I'm really interested in democracy. right? Nobody in the right wing is, and in my opinion, nobody in the left wing is either. Very, very few people are really interested in it. But when you look at the world that way, veganism, right? It's a method. When you look at the world in terms of ecology, in terms of carbon dioxide levels, et cetera, veganism is not an end in itself. Veganism is a method, right? Now, the ideal situation to be in is one of collaboration in which nobody gives orders and nobody follows orders. Within the vegan movement, I have been in a situation in which either I could follow the orders of someone I actually consider to be evil, or I could be totally despised and alone precisely because I would not play the game of follow the leader. How about you? In the last 5 years, how about you? In the next 5 years, what are you going to do to change that? And as much as I may despise Extinction Rebellion, okay, Google it right now, the parts per million chart for carbon, ppm, carbon, atmosphere. You can Google it right now also, the average ocean temperature. That's the one that really matters. As much as I may heap scorn on these other groups, I'm sorry to tell you, but I actually think we are dealing with a finite number of years.
Equal rights means that the security at an event of this kind treats you the same, regardless of what your political ideology is. It doesn't matter if you're pro-racist or you're anti-racist. If you climb over that barrier, security is going to beat you with the same bat and put you in the same handcuffs and put you in the back of the same truck. Your motivations don't matter. The moral character of your cause does not matter. This is just a judgment based on the methods you use. And the methods endorsed by DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, are disruption. And you get to see just how ineffective, counterproductive, and fundamentally stupid that is in these clips of them attempting to disrupt Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. And if you think the professional security are rough on you, guess what? They're there for a reason. They're going to handle you in a much more ethical manner than the crowd. Because if you disrupt an event like that and they don't pull you out of the crowd can turn on you. And then it's a bunch of amateurs beating you up to shut you down. Okay? That can be even nastier. That can be nastier at a rock concert. That can be nasty at a political rally. But the other thing to remember about equal rights is that there's no fundamental difference between you and the people on that stage. In a democracy, anyone can rent a stage. I remember there being protests when you'd have a controversial figure like Henry Kissinger or George Bush Sr. He used to go to universities. Do you have a controversial figure like Kissinger or Bush show up at a university campus? There would be people whose idea of political activism was to try to interrupt the event at that stage, at the room that was rented for the lecture. But the irony is, on most university campuses, certainly at every university campus I've been on in the Western world, you could actually rent your own stage. In most cases, you could rent the same room. You could have your own event. You could have your own lecture, your own presentation, your own activist event, reflecting on the crimes against humanity committed by Henry Kissinger or George Bush Sr., reflecting on the politics of the bombing of Cambodia or the bombing of Iraq or whatever it is that floats your boat about animal rights, about veganism, about ecology. Okay? The fact is, you do have the freedom to organize your own rally, but you do not have the freedom to disrupt someone else's rally. And the basic principles of human rights, equal rights for human beings, entail that if you did have the right to disrupt, everyone else would also. The crazy right-wingers, the racists, the neo-Nazis. You can't claim that vegans only have some special privilege to climb over that barrier and others do not. Either everyone has that right or nobody does. Freedom of speech gives you the right to hold your own rally, to speak with your own voice, to speak for yourself, and that's a beautiful thing, and all of us should be taking better advantage of it. But it does not give you the right to silence somebody else. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders supporters are not showing up at your rally, climbing over your barriers, and getting punched out trying to silence you when you talk about veganism. So why are you doing it to them?
No one has ever been arrested at one of our days of action.
My overall experience with Direct Action Everywhere is that they're an institution based on lies, built on lies. They lie constantly about what their own methods are, what their own objectives are, what the organization is. And in this video, I have to ask very simply, why would they lie about people being arrested when very clearly there are arrests going on?
We are the Protest Working Group, and we want to give you all of the information you need and make you feel comfortable about joining us. Our protests are always non-violent, and we do not target individuals or employees at the places that we protest. We have people trained to deal with the police, and no one has ever been arrested at one of our days of action.
And if you just Google Direct Action Everywhere and arrest, you will find on their same website almost boasting about the fact that so many people have been arrested. This one specifies arrest warrants issued.
À-bas-le-ciel.
Institutional attitudes are hard to change. As difficult as it may be for an individual person to change their mind, it can be much, much more difficult for an institution to recognize what it's doing, why it's doing it, or, for example, how much circumstances have changed since a certain decision was made. I have an article, I can give a link below this video, totally different chapter of politics, nothing to do with veganism, talking about foreign policy relationships between China, the United States, and Cambodia. Very often you see a decision made by a president of the United States or a leader of China, and then certain bureaucratic attitudes take over. The professional bureaucracy takes over the issue, and nobody is really questioning why the policy goal is being pursued as decades and decades go by. And we do also say in English that institutions have a sort of culture of their own. They have a set of assumptions that get locked in place. Now, Direct Action Everywhere has improved. I think it's fair to say that, I criticized them very harshly in the past, so did Gary Francione, several other people. I think that on some level, they have reformed in response to that criticism. They used to pursue some unbelievably stupid policies, such as denying veganism and saying that people should not use the word vegan. Gary Francione said they became the #1 anti-vegan movement. It was ridiculous. And they had this complex rationale for why somehow the word vegan was inherently evil and bad, because this is to quote their policy. Their policy was that veganism is not the moral baseline, activism is the moral baseline, as if somehow veganism is an unwanted crutch or excuse and a distraction from the method they're presenting us with. But I have to say, my overall experience with Direct Action Everywhere is that they're an institution based on lies, built on lies. They lie constantly about what their own methods are, what their own objectives are, what the organization is. For a very long time, they denied that they had any hierarchy. You used to be able to see that on their website, very clearly read out. They claimed they were a completely horizontal organization, when the reality was they do have a top-down hierarchy. They're very unequal. They very obviously have one self-appointed leader for life, Wayne Seong, and they have his girlfriend as the #2 person. They would lie about fundraising. They would claim they weren't receiving any donations when they were asking for and receiving donations. They lied about absolutely everything they did and how and why they did it, which I just found bizarre. Why pretend you have no hierarchy when you do? Why pretend you don't want donations when you are in fact asking for them? And in this video, I have to ask very simply, why would they lie about people being arrested when very clearly there are arrests going on. So you can see here on their own website, I've got the URL in the top left corner of the screenshot, the claim that nobody has ever been arrested.
No one has ever been arrested.
And if you just Google Direct Action Everywhere and arrest, you will find on their same website almost boasting about the fact that so many people have been arrested. This one specifies arrest warrants issued. In some other cases, we don't have the word arrest appearing, but if you just look at some of these videos, it's obvious that people are at least being detained by the authorities, that people in uniform, security guards, police, or what have you, are putting handcuffs on them and dragging them away. I mean, I'm not hallucinating here. How is it possible for an institution to be so dishonest to lie to the people involved and claim that nobody has ever been arrested? To quote them, they claim nobody has ever been arrested at a DXE action. The only sense in which you can imagine this is true is that people were dragged away in handcuffs and arrested afterwards. How is it possible to have this level of duplicity and to be in a role of political leadership? Okay? It's bad and it's wrong and it's shameful. And it sets a terrible example for the next generation. We have a video here, which is them proudly showing off a 14-year-old supporter they have. And this 14-year-old, the video title is that this 14-year-old disrupts the meat counter by herself.
We all have the power to be their hope. You gotta go. In 2017, join the animal rights movement.
But I gotta tell you, Direct Action Everywhere, in setting a model for this 14-year-old, in actively training her in this method, and in ultimately glorifying being arrested and going to prison, while at the same time lying about the fact that people get arrested and go to prison. This is an absolutely terrible example to set for the youth, and this is a horrible negative influence. You can ask yourself how you'd feel if this was your own 14-year-old sister or your own 14-year-old daughter. DXE, look, a friend of mine wrote to me an email really claiming that they had improved. I got an email, from a colleague in the vegan movement saying that DXE is not as bad today as it was a few years ago when I made my prior videos criticizing them, saying that DXE had abandoned some of the ridiculous anti-vegan policy positions they had before. Well, clap, clap. Institutional attitudes are hard to change. It's much more difficult to change an institution's attitudes than an individual's attitude. I haven't seen DXE apologize for those things. I haven't seen them retract those things. I haven't seen them really declare what's different now from what was there before. I've just seen mysterious changes on their website, whereas before they claimed they were not even an organization, that they were totally decentralized and totally horizontal. Now they admit they're highly centralized and they're highly vertical. They have top-down, unequal ranks. Some people give orders and some people follow orders. Some chapters are more equal than others. Some people are in charge and some people are some people are leaders and some people are followers. They used to deny all of that. I haven't seen any indication that they're learning the lessons. I just see them deleting. I just see them, removing web pages that stated their former policy positions and the new policy positions that are more vague and evasive than the ones before. I think that an important part of learning from experience on an institutional level involves admitting that you were wrong. And they should admit that they were wrong on a whole range of issues, from the purely organizational issues through to serious matters of principle, like what their stand is on veganism and the use of the word vegan itself, their ridiculous confrontation with Gary Francione on that issue, or them lying about issues as diverse as violence, breaking the law, arrest, and fundraising, where the money comes from, where it goes, what this organization is. DXE, in a nutshell, your organization has been built on lies, and I see you struggling to change, but you seem to be incapable of changing that most basic fact.
To kill and eat someone who does not want to die. Well, good on you. Because of their desire to live and their desire to be free. They are no different.
This video is wrapped up in less than 10 minutes. However, I want to let you guys know I do take Direct Action Everywhere seriously, If you look at the playlists section on this channel, you're going to find a playlist there devoted to Direct Action Everywhere. I have many videos talking about these issues of effective activism, organization, how to make a difference in the world, what Direct Action Everywhere is doing right, and mostly what they're doing wrong, not in a catty or flippant or shallow way, but really examining and reflecting on these issues. So if this video is not enough for you, or if you want to respond by criticizing me, feel free to do so, but please do click on that link, take a look at my past work, discussing and reflecting on these issues.
À-bas-le-ciel.
Just lately, I've been talking to a journalist who's researching Direct Action Everywhere. He's writing an article about it, and I said to him, look, man, the story here is the money, period. The story is, where does the money come from? Where does the money go? And who controls it? And wow, they managed to ride this hypocrite thing all the way out, because the most recent financial reports we've got, over $800,000 US. Who is giving that money? And what do they think it's going to? But above all else, let's remember this. Direct Action Everywhere promised that they would be different from all the other organizations that came before. They'd be different from People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They'd be different from Humane Society. They would be different because they were going to be the one and only organization that was devoted to social science research. And what do they do now? They do the lowest kind of headline chasing, press release baiting, attention-getting stunts, publicity stunts. They take a teenage girl in a bikini and have her lie down on top of the frozen meat in a grocery store, and they put fake blood on her, and they stand around and chant wearing masks and holding signs. Do you think they did social science research to back up that method? Do you think they did social science research into the effectiveness of any of the methods of these stunts, these demonstrations they do, these protests?
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.
There was an old-fashioned saying that the media should hold up the mirror to society. You know, the newspapers hold up a mirror and you behold your reflection in it. And you know, what we do here on YouTube, in some ways it's a sort of distorted funhouse mirror, but in some ways, social media now serves that purpose. YouTube provides us with a very interesting metric, a measurement of activity, a measurement of public interest. I'm going to contrast for you right now two very different numbers. 800,000 and 270. 800,000 US dollars. 270 views on YouTube. Doesn't it seem a little bit fishy to you? Doesn't it seem a little bit strange that a group that manages to consistently propel itself into newspaper headlines, a group with an astronomical annual budget, with $800,000 in donations coming in just 1 year, and this is reported formally in basically tax information to the American government, by the way. This isn't just some rumor on the internet. They got 800,000. Isn't it astounding that they have fewer views on a video talking about vegan activism than I do? I have a lot of experience uploading videos talking about different issues, veganism, but I blow away Direct Action Everywhere's numbers on talking about some really obscure topics. And I managed to get several thousand views talking about Brianna Jack Fruitson ceasing to be vegan. I've made videos from, straight up book reviews, political science discussions, philosophy. I have experience with the whole range. And Direct Action Everywhere, they're really putting some money and effort into these film productions. I can't tell you that the quality of their filmmaking has gotten worse and worse. I think over the years it's gotten better and better. But the audience has dwindled. Right? That's a little bit strange. That's a little bit fishy to me. All right, it raises questions about what was supposed to be their founding mandate, which was to study social science research, find out what was effective activism and what was not. Evidently, what they're doing in a very real sense is not effective. They're putting out a message that people do not want to hear. So one particular example here. This is a 44-minute video. DXE responds to Vice's documentary about DXE. So you don't know Vice. Vice at this point can be called a mainstream media outlet. They're not quite as mainstream as CBS or NBC. They started as a magazine. They have a YouTube channel. They're carried on HBO on broadcast television. Vice is a mass market, big audience outlet, and they made a documentary on Direct Action Everywhere, on DXE. And here's a video they're making on their own channel that's linked directly to that mass media coverage. And 1 month later, there are only 573 views on that video. Now, I just say again, I'm very experienced with YouTube. When you have a video that is 44 minutes long, if one person watches it seriously, they watch the whole thing, they're going to count as 3 or 4 views because they watch it and then they stop and go to the bathroom and come back the next day and reopen it again. It's not really measuring views, it's measuring viewings. So the same person ends up clicking on the video repeatedly when you have a video that long. These are really small numbers. These are worryingly small numbers for an organization that, again, gets into the front pages of newspapers from time to time. It has a huge budget, and they claim they have thousands and thousands of volunteers all around the world. Now, today it's very, very hard to get a number from them. They'd always dodge the question of that. If you ask them, well, how many volunteers do you have? They'll say, like, well, everyone who gives a thumbs up to our Facebook group is a volunteer. Everyone who supports us in spirit is a volunteer. Come on, how many people are you actually organizing in these protests? I don't know. Probably they don't know. But this is ostensibly tens of thousands of people organized under the leadership of Wayne Seong with Direct Action Everywhere. And none of them seem to be interested in hearing what Wayne Seong has to say. None of them seem to be interested in listening to their own leader's message. That's worrying. That's a warning sign. Again, this is just YouTube being a mirror you can hold up to this phenomenon. It leads us to scrutinize and question what's really going on here. So, and again, let's be clear. I have neither a false humility about this nor am I on some kind of ego trip. If I upload a video talking about Aristotle and it has 1,500 views, believe me, I'm happy. Hey, wow, I managed to get 1,500 people to listen to me tell you my opinion about the philosophy of Aristotle, Socrates. If I upload a video about Socrates and Plato and it has 500 views, fabulous. I'm doing absolutely nothing to cater to a mainstream audience. I'm not offering any special effects or drama. These are kind of philosophical videos for a small number of people who are sincerely interested in them. All right. Here is a video Direct Action Everywhere uploaded 8 months ago titled 58 Activists Arrested Rescuing Chickens. And it's 2 hours long. So again, when you have a video that long, if anyone's watching it seriously, they'll count as many views. When you have 58 activists involved in that event, each one of those activists has friends and family who would be interested in the video, right? Oh, you know, my sister got arrested going to this thing. Oh, I want to see what happened, right? Just whatever, friends from high school, connections in your own social media, casual acquaintances who are connected to those 58 people, and more than 58 people were there, I think, they will all click on the video and show some interest. Doesn't it seem peculiar to you that only 1,300 people clicked on this video for this event? And again, it's an event that, I mean, these are ambulance chasers. I don't know if you guys know that old slang term. They court controversy. They pursue controversy. They try to force their way into headlines to get shameless self-promotion. But with all that shameless self-promotion having been noted, nobody cares. Nobody wants to watch this. Nobody wants to watch this, even compared to me talking about Socrates or Aristotle, even compared to me, some of my videos complaining about minor ironies and kind of interesting little controversies within vegan activism as a movement, right? So why is that? That raises questions. And again, we can just ask hypothetically whether you regard, you know, what I do here on YouTube as a success or a failure. It's kind of irrelevant to this question. How many viewers do you think would be looking at my content if I had a budget of $800,000 And if I had organized under my leadership, remember, these people live in a compound. They literally have a series of houses where they live like a cult, or at best like a kind of hippie commune. They live together. But I mean, if I had just 1,000 people organized under my leadership, wouldn't it make sense for these videos to have more than 1,000 views? Wouldn't, if more than 1,000 people regard me as their leader, wouldn't at least 1,000 people be clicking on the lectures I'm giving? No. All right. So it's a really interesting, really quizzical situation. So here on screen, you see a selection of their most recent videos. Again, I'm not going to insult them. I don't think this is complete garbage. All right. More than half of these videos, I think, are complete garbage. Some of these are okay. Some of them are informative. Some of them they put a lot of work into. If anything, over the years, they've really been making an effort to improve their craft as filmmakers and doing outreach and communication. But they have failed. And this failure is itself very interesting because there are numerous YouTubers doing the same kind of infotainment for veganism without getting themselves thrown in prison, without doing disruption, without doing illegal forms of activism, who became massively successful, reached huge audiences with absolutely zero budget, without having $800,000 behind them. Right? So there are some important questions to be asked. Now, this is the 33rd video I've made on this channel about direct action everywhere. Just lately, I've been talking to a journalist who's researching direct action everywhere. He's writing an article about it. And I said to him, look, man, the story here is the money, period. The story is, where does the money come from? Where does the money go? And who controls it, period. That is the story about DXE. There is no other story here that's worth talking about. What is DXE? If this journalist were to ask me, what is DXE? Why does it matter? My answer is DXE today is the diametric opposite of everything it promised to be when it was founded just a few years ago. DXE today is a parody of the virtues it formerly preached. Does this ring any bells for you guys? Do you remember this? Quote, DXE is a completely horizontal network of activists, not even an organization. Would I talk to their members and ask them questions, say, oh, well, how are you guys organized? They'd say, oh, no, we're not an organization. It's completely horizontal. There are no leaders. There are no followers. Fully horizontal network of equal activists in chapters. No leaders. Do you remember that? Do you remember Direct Action Everywhere boasting that they do no fundraising, that they don't want money? They even said that in the debate with Gary Francione. Some of you guys who are really into vegan activism will remember that. There's a cultural reference for you. Gary Francione debating with them, and Wayne Seong said, no, we don't want any donations. We do no fundraising. And Gary said back to him, come on, Wayne, we all know you're lying. I've been to your website, and there's a big button you can click on that says donate now, click here. So even back then, this contradiction was there. And wow, they managed to ride this hypocrite thing all the way out, because the most recent financial reports we've got over $800,000 US. Who is giving that money? And what do they think it's going to? You know, anyway, the official excuse or explanation from Wayne is that this is going to actually house and feed the animals that they've rescued. Takes a really brief Google search to shed some doubt on that claim. There's been a long storied history of the people who run the animal shelters complaining about DXE. You rescue these animals, you just dump them here, you don't pay for them, you don't take care of them, there are huge financial burdens involved. I have inside information. I've spoken to one of those people who runs one of those sanctuaries. This has been a huge issue. Now that they've got $800,000 to burn, I don't know what percentage of the money is actually going to house and care for cows. And for the donors, is that what you think you're doing it for? Look, there was a time, I know you guys who watch my channel will remember this promise. There was a time when they promised no one has ever been arrested at one of their days of action. Do you guys remember that promise, that they weren't about anyone getting arrested? I've played that clip over and over again on this channel, right? If you just add up the different promises, the things that defined them, it becomes clear the core definition of what this organization was, is, and is supposed to be. It's been turned inside out. It's been turned upside down on its head. But above all else, let's remember this. Direct Action Everywhere promised that they would be different from all the other organizations that came before. They'd be different from People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They'd be different from Humane Society. They would be different because they were going to be the one and only organization that was devoted to social science research. It's been a long time since we heard those words from Wayne Seong, right? Social science research, that the actions they engaged in, the strategic choices they made would be 100% based on learning the lessons of social science research. And what do they do now? They do the lowest kind of headline chasing, press release baiting, attention getting stunts, publicity stunts. They take a teenage girl in a bikini and have her lie down on top of the frozen meat in a grocery store, and they put fake blood on her, and they stand around and chant wearing masks and holding signs. Do you think they did social science research to back up that method? Do you think they did social science research into the effectiveness of any of the methods of these stunts, these demonstrations they do, these protests? Do you think they're doing social science research right now into why it is that they have thousands or tens of thousands of members and a budget of over 800,000 US dollars, but they can't get the number of viewers I get with 0 followers, 0 members, 0 organization, 0 budget when they put up a lecture talking about veganism, talking about vegan politics, and this kind of thing, all right? That is mind-blowing. And here's the final irony from my perspective. I got into this game with veganism with none of the pretensions and none of the megalomania of Wayne Seong and Direct Action Everywhere. None. But you know what, ironically? We, right now, you and me, viewer, the viewers of à-bas-le-ciel, we're living up to the original dream of Direct Action Everywhere much more than they are. You and I right now are in a fully horizontal, decentralized network of activists. There are no leaders and no followers here. None of you are donating money towards me. Okay, $1 a month on Patreon if you if you want. What's the total budget there now? Like $200 or something? Few people donate money for the channel, okay? We're living up to that dream. And I'm out here. I'm sincerely interested in social science research. I'm sincerely interested in the difference between what is effective activism and what is not, instead of selling you a dogmatic dream that if you will just obey, if you will obey, if you will follow orders and get yourself put in prison, that will bring about the vegan utopia in the future. All right? Wayne Seong and Direct Action Everywhere, you have become a parody. You have become the sick inversion of everything you once preached and everything you once aspired to. Where are these people going to be 10 years from now? Everybody grows up. I see that red-haired young woman who was still a university girl. She was a teenager when she got started with Direct Action Everywhere. She's moved up in the ranks. I see her now sitting next to Wayne Seong as if she's kind of number 2 in there. Maybe she's replaced Priya, and she makes better YouTube videos than most of them. I see people who started this just as teenagers. This is another girl who started when she was 14 or 15, started screaming at strangers in grocery stores. I've had clips of these things on my channel in the past. Okay, everybody grows up sometime. And you know what? Ironically, most of the people who were a part of Direct Action Everywhere 1.0, they've all moved on and quit. They've all gotten straight. You can just Google their names. The people who were actually in the founding documents, who were in the original generation, kind of everyone except Wayne and his girlfriend Priya have stuck around. They've all grown up and moved on. And you can write to those people on Facebook. I've talked to some of those people. The generation of original founders. Sooner or later, people wake up, grow up, and move on. And you know where Wayne's going to be? Wayne is going to be sitting on top of $800,000 US.